That's that music. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Sunday show. I'm Dillahunty. Joining me today, Paulogia. How are you, sir?
I am doing well. I'm unsupervised and live and happy to be talking to people.
Ooh, I wish I was unsupervised. I am gradually being occasionally supervised because I'm a very bad boy. Okay, we'll set all that aside. So welcome. The Sunday show is everybody's opportunity to call in and explain what you believe and why, in particular related to gods, the supernatural, etc. Theists of some stripe will always get priority. It doesn't matter whether you're advocating for Jesus or Allah or whatever. But if you're just calling in to say you think the universe is God, be prepared to say, for us to ask why, and what does putting the God label on the universe change? Because Paul and I agree there's a universe. There's a reality. We're already on board with that. So we believe in reality. And if reality is your God, then we need to know, what is adding the God label add to it? If you're a Catholic, there's a new Catholic apologist AI. I just recorded a session the other day of myself interacting with it. And it's really, really bad. But I will say, in all honesty, this isn't a dig, but it's accurate. It's just as good as any Catholic apologist human I've ever engaged with. It keeps going back to circular. It's like, oh, it's in the Bible. It's in the Bible. It's in the Bible. Well, how do we know the Bible's reliable? We don't just rely on the Bible. We also rely on church tradition. How do we know church tradition is reliable? Because in the Bible it says, so they've taken the circular loop of the Bible affirming the Bible, and they've injected almost in like a 69 position, a separate party of church tradition. And the Bible affirms church tradition, and church tradition affirms the Bible, and yet it's entirely circular. But that one layer of obfuscation is evidently enough to fool every Catholic on the planet, or at least so far.
So I need to fix my cup so that it has for tradition tells me so, pointing to for the Bible tells me so, pointing to for the tradition. I need to update that.
Yeah.
This is my Protestant cup, I guess. My sola scriptura cup.
The Bible affirms, church tradition affirms, do it in a circle, and put a crucifix right in the middle of it. Boom. Line merchandise. That's what we do. All right. So
Jimmy.
In all honesty, that was my experience. I posted that on my personal YouTube channel. If we don't get callers, we may just see about having AI come in and defend it. Because if you're a Catholic, you either think you can do better than the AI, in which case, please do. Because if it turns out we're wrong, we would like to know. And our position is not you're wrong in the sense that your God doesn't exist. Our position is we have not been convinced that your God exists. And every single time somebody's presented evidence and argument to us, it has been filled with fallacies and suppositions and things that we can't demonstrate. And so I can't say that the conclusion is wrong, but I can say you're irrational to believe based on the reasons that we've been given over and over. And that's, it's your prerogative. We are all going to be mistaken or irrational about something, but we're genuinely here wanting people to call in and say, okay, here's what you missed. Because if we missed something and there's a good reason to believe in God, we definitely want to address that. Whether or not we worship a God is a completely separate issue from whether or not we believe there is a God. I believe there's a president. I think he's a piece of crap. I believe that England has a king. I don't know much about him, but I don't think he should exist as a king. I'm fine with the notion that there are people in leadership positions who are real and have massive power and could squash me like a bug, and yet I don't worship them or anything else. It's also the case that You might think you have good reasons, and you've just never been in a position to have them challenged. And if you're open to having those positions challenged, Paul and I will do our best. And maybe you can either find that your reasons that you thought were good for believing in a God are not good. That doesn't mean that you have to necessarily stop believing, but it does mean you should be going out to find better reasons. And so even the simplest apologetics that we deal with should be sending people off to sharpen up their tool set with better arguments. And the one question you should probably ask yourself if you're heading off to do that is, am I someone who has a conclusion that is shopping for a justification? Or am I someone asking a question and looking for a justified answer? And so if the question is there an afterlife? Is there a foundation of morality? Is there a creator for reality? Those are questions that we can seek some sort of rational explanation for. And it may be that the right answer is, I don't know. But if you're convinced there's a God and every argument you present is problematic, you might be in a position where you have a conclusion and you're desperately seeking, I keep getting a whistle, you're desperately seeking some sort of justification for it. On that note, we have calls open, or we have lines open right now. 720-619-2288 is the telephone number, and telephone calls will get preference. But if you are not able to call in due to long distance stuff and everything else, there is a link below this in the description where you can click the link and go directly to call in studio as long as you have internet access, and you can call into the show that way. I'd like to remind people, you probably don't have to do the can you hear me okay? We'll figure that out kind of as we go along. And please know there is a delay. When we interrupt and pause, we're not just doing it to, like push people around. We're here doing a show. There are several other people waiting on hold, and we want to get clarity and communication going as quickly as possible. If we ask a question, if you're not willing to answer that question, just say, yeah, I don't know, or I don't want to answer that. That's much, much better than trying to get a sermon in that just irritates us, mutes us, and then you're like, well, you won't let me talk. No, I'm happy to let you talk, but we've got questions. And if you don't have an answer to it, great, we can move on to the next question to see if maybe you have an answer to those. But my question for today is this: is your God more reliable than a magic 8-ball? If you think you have a God that is more reliable than the magic 8-ball toy, I don't have one right here. There's a virtual one, but I'm not going to use it because we're going to avoid any hint of anything non-material. But we're all familiar with the magic 8-ball. It's a little globe with water. It's got a little polyhedron inside of it. You ask a question and turn it over, and they'll say, yes, definitely, or outlook looks cloudy, or whatever else. And I have no idea how accurate a magic 8-ball is. I have no reason to think that an 8-ball is more accurate than chance. But I will say that every single time I've picked up a magic 8-ball and asked it a question, I at least got some response that I could directly show to someone else, and they could verify that I got that exact response. In the history of the world, has there ever been a response from any God that individuals could independently verify? Like, not just, oh, I think I heard God say we should move. Oh, I think I heard God say we should move too, because my parents have done that shit. It's if I ask a magic 8-ball something and show it, I can record that answer, and anybody, whether they believe in a magic 8-ball or not, can look at that and say, yep, it said yes, definitely. Has anything like that ever happened for any God? And if not, why aren't you just asking a magic 8-ball if you're not getting verifiable responses? And then from there you can move on to, why am I wasting time with something that operates at the rate of chance? But I am ready. There's a couple of quick announcements I want to make, because yesterday we had an all hands meeting here at the line. The line is the network, not the show. This show is the Sunday show. The line is the network, and there are plenty of other shows right here on the network, the line. Generally, they are all call-in shows, but some of that is going to change. And so it's not just going to be the line in the sense of a phone line, but it can be a line in the sense of hold the line, draw the line, toe the line, whatever. You are now on the line. The Sunday show airs every Sunday at 2 o'clock. Today it's me and Paul. There's also a Sunday show after dark that starts at 7 o'clock. These are central times. So we just started, and 5 hours from now, there will be a Sunday show after dark with Forrest Falkai and Seth Andrews. Tomorrow evening, starting at 6 p.m. Central, Forrest Falkai and Erica Gibbon will be on Skeptalk. And so get all of your science questions ready. They will be going, who knows? They may do the show from Monday all the way through Thursday for all I know. They are nuts at how long they'll go on. And I just love listening to two incredibly bright people and knowledgeable people talk about science and educate people. Tuesday's Chewed Gum, it's going to be Arden Hart and Taylor. And then Wednesday, I'm going to be on with Justin from Deconstruction Zone on my show, The Hang Up, also at 6 o'clock. And Thursday's Transatlantic Call-In show is going to be at 2 p.m. Central, so the same time here is the Sunday show with Arden and Ben. And then next week, we start it all over again. But there's changes coming at the line, which means you're going to see more episodes of Cus I Wanna, more duologues, more hostility, more interactions where we draw in people for interviews, people to potentially give lectures, to have shows that don't necessarily require a call-in structure, so that we are building a network that entertains, educates, and hopefully elucidates people on a number of different topics. We are working towards LineCon and other ways of getting people together, interacting both in meet space and in virtual space, and supporting great organizations like recoveringfromreligion.org and others that benefit everybody. And so those are all of your announcements. I now relinquish control of my entire life, including my bank account, to Paul, because there's nothing in it. So
I was going to say, you need someone to deposit something. Maybe that's why you.
Yes, please
It's a
deposit
50-50 chance. Perfect. Well, we have one thing I was going to say about the Magic 8 Ball and the Catholic AI. I'm assuming the Catholic AI and the 8 Ball don't appeal to personal experience. And so in that way, they might be superior to some of the apologists, because sometimes does that appeal to, well, God spoke to me. I know that's not transferable to you, but God spoke to me. So I've never had the Magic 8 Ball pull that on me. So I'm assuming the Catholic one didn't either.
It was
all right.
It was a fun experience.
Yeah, when this is done, and when Forrest is done, if you're still awake after all that, you can check out Matt's video on the Catholic AI. But we have a couple of calls, so let's jump in and talk to some folks. The first caller we have Doug from California, who's an agnostic. Doug, welcome to the Sunday show. You're on with Matt and Paul. What do you have for us today?
Well, hello. I've been reading the Bible, and guess what? Doug, I'm not a Christian anymore.
Hey, Doug, can you back away from the microphone to the phone? You're kind of overdriving it. It's crackling a little bit, so you can just hold it further from your face. But yes, that's better. That's better.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, Doug.
Unfortunately, I have to hold it close enough for my ear to hear you, so I can't make my mouth far away.
This is great.
Okay, cool.
We're good now. Thanks.
All right. So, the reason why I'm calling, because I listen to your show often. I like learning stuff. And sorry, I'm kind of stammering because I'm not used to being on the air. But the reason why I'm calling is because I believe that all Christians are bad at being Christians because they don't do their homework. I did my homework, and I am no longer a Christian.
Okay.
In addition to that, I would.
Was that you just wanted to come in and cast aspersions on Christians, or did you have a question in there?
I wanted to run something by Matt because he says that he knows a lot about the Bible. So I noticed something in my readings, and even though I'm not a Christian anymore, I pick the Bible apart as best I can. So, anyway, I found something last night that I thought was interesting. In Exodus, people consider Exodus 20 the beginning of the Ten Commandments, and I understand that it's not the only place, but Exodus 34 is the only one that says it is the Ten Commandments. The others don't. They call them laws of the covenant.
Yeah.
So I'm suggesting that the real Ten Commandments are in chapter 34 of Exodus. When you open your most Bibles, they'll have
what
a
difference
heading.
does it make? What difference does it make? So here's the thing. Let's assume there's the 613 mitzvahs or commandments, which take up Exodus, and we grab the first 10 of them and call them the 10 Commandments. And then there's another list of commandments, and that one is referred to as the 10 Commandments. What difference does it make to anyone on the planet, Christian or not, Jewish or not, whether one of them is the 10 Commandments? They are all commandments from the same source, and they all carry the same weight. So it's like you think you've stumbled across, I found the real 10 Commandments over here in this chapter, and they're looking at this other list of 10 Commandments. No, they're looking at a list that is the beginning of 613 commandments, and you're looking at a different list. And what possible difference could it make what we call them? They weren't called this, and it doesn't matter that people called them that.
There's a very interesting point, and the answer I have is that supposedly, according to the Bible, which I don't believe, but supposedly, those were the commandments written on the tablets.
So what?
Well, I thought that would be tantamount, actually. I thought that would be tantamount.
When you were a Christian, did you think only the ones written on the tablets were relevant, or were all of them relevant?
Oh, I definitely thought that if God said so, you're supposed to do it, yeah.
Okay, so what difference does it make which ones were written on the tablets and which ones were written on the old tablets or the new tablets?
I suppose I'm being a dick and just trying to prove that the Bible's full of shit.
How does that prove that the Bible's full of shit if you are setting some priority on which one you think is the right one? I mean, they all come from the same source. So,
yeah, actually, very good. Very good point. I'm just nitpicking, I suppose. Ultimately, I'm trying to prove to Christians that they should read their Bible and understand it to the point.
Doug.
Yes.
When Jesus was asked, what are the most important commandments? What was his answer? I'm just seeing if you've read your Bible.
He changed the first commandment. He left it out completely. Well, what they consider the first commandment in Exodus 20, he left that part all out.
What did Jesus say?
And he switched it with love thy neighbor as you love thyself.
No, it's not. Well, that's one of them. Well, the first one was what?
Okay. Give me a second. I should know this. Something about love God more than anything else or something like that.
Love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Those are the two most important commandments. Jesus said those are the two most important commandments. So why would any Christian in the world be concerned? They're very much new covenant people. And I'm not trying to defend Christianity, but again, you're not going to come across to a thinking Christian as having points. You know, what you're doing, and it hurts my heart, is that you're straw manning Christianity, right? Christianity very much is a new covenant, old covenant religion. A lot of them will just wave away anything in the Old Testament and say, that doesn't apply to me at all. So you're not going to gotcha anybody with semantics about the headings, right? Because what you're talking about are the headings in the Bible. Those weren't in the original Hebrew. The original Hebrew didn't even have vowels, let alone headings. So again,
periods or commas. I understand.
If you want to be a jerk, by all means, go be a jerk. That's great. I'm not going to follow you, but that's fine. It takes all. You need George Carlin's and other people. That's great. But do it
Yeah.
well or don't do it, please.
Yeah, because I don't
Okay.
know if your goal is to try to get Christians to read and understand their Bible. Isn't that
Yes.
also what their ministers are doing?
Yeah, but their ministers
No. There's no
are
but. There's no but. There's no but. That was a yes or no question. Ministers are also trying to get people to read and understand their Bible, and
yes.
they've clearly
And
repeatedly
they're
failed. They've clearly repeatedly failed, despite the fact that they know all of it better than you do. So, what is it that you think you're going to do as an agnostic who does not know and understand the Bible to convince Christians to know and understand the Bible?
When I was a Christian, I decided that it mattered enough to me to go through the Bible with a fine-tooth comb and galvanize my beliefs. By the time I was done, I realized I'm not a Christian anymore.
Did you get further than Exodus?
Yeah, what?
I don't know. You said you were going to go through the Bible with a fine-tooth comb. I don't know how far you got before you realized that you didn't have a good reason. But my question was, since you're a former Christian who does not particularly understand the Bible, what good does it do for you to try, and how are you trying to encourage Christians to go and study their Bible? And why would a Christian listen to you in your encouragement to get them to study their Bible?
Well, I look at it like this. If somebody who I considered trustworthy lied to me several times, I would stop trusting that person. And I would like to point out to Christians that there are lies in the Bible and that maybe they should question it more.
Okay. What's a lie in the Bible?
A lie? Okay, that's I misspoke. Okay, how about contradictions?
Okay. What's
And
a contradiction in the Bible?
if contradictions are going to be
What's a
presented
contradiction
as
in the
truth,
Bible? What's a contradiction in the Bible?
well, for instance, Judas, where did he die?
Does it matter? Is it relevant to anybody's salvation what happened to Judas? Because when I was a Christian and when I was studying to be a minister, the view is that we don't have the originals, and the Bible contains scribal errors and imperfections and human errors from people reporting on the same events. The Bible's inspired and perfect in its original, but we don't have access to those. And it never made the slightest difference to me as a believer how Judas reportedly died. How is that relevant to whether or not Jesus came down, the parts that are agreed upon amongst the various gospels? To point to something where there's disagreement, that doesn't disprove the parts where there's agreement, does it?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so it's irrelevant. So you think you're going to change people's minds with things that aren't relevant?
I believe that as I did, I think other people would probably react the way I did if they realized that the Bible is not absolutely 100% true and that it should be looked into.
Yeah, in defense of you, Doug, I was in that camp. I was in the Bible is 100% true, and if it's only 99% true, it's 0% true. I was 100% in that camp, and I came to the same conclusions as you. As soon as infallibility fell away, a lot of it fell away very quickly. But the problem was for people in those camps who've thought it through, they go to apologists and they say, well, hey, in Acts 1, Judas falls headlong, his body bursts open, his all intestines spill out. And in Matthew 26, I think, he's hanged, right?
He hung himself. Yeah.
But if you're someone like I was, well, you're like, well, both of those things have to be true for my beliefs to be true, and so you just harmonize it. Well, he tried to hang himself, the rope broke, and he fell down, and his body burst open, and you figured out a different harmonization.
I harmonized it differently in that when he hung himself to death and rotted to the point where his neck broke, and then his body fell down, falling headlong, and spewed forth his guts. And that, while there's no justification for that rationalization in the eye of a believer along with concepts about scribal errors, is going to be, I don't know, enough for most of them. But I mean, what are you doing, Doug, to how, when and where are you interacting with Christians to try to get them to read and understand their Bible?
Right now.
No, you're not. You called into an atheist show.
And lots of Christians listen. And I have heard you say many times that the reason why you do what you do is because you're hoping that Christians will listen.
Okay. Well, we prefer to have people who know what they're talking about on here to do that, and to avoid things that aren't particularly relevant. Like, I don't need atheists to call in to try to talk theists out of their beliefs, because there's no guarantee you're talking to any of them. Plus, that's our job.
All right, Doug. Did you have any final parting words before? I think we've exhausted this conversation as far as it's going to go, since none of us believe that the Bible is an inerrant word of God. Any final thought before we let you go today?
Nothing I haven't already said. Read your Bible and become an atheist.
All right.
That's how you'll do it.
That is an absolutely ridiculous line, because Muslims have read the Bible and they didn't become an atheist, and Hindus have read the Bible and they haven't become an atheist. Reading the Bible does not necessarily lead anyone to atheism, and anyone who becomes an atheist because they read the Bible is automatically fallacious. Because if they're saying, I am not convinced there's a God, and I'm only convinced because I read the Bible and found there were problems in it, then did you read these other things? Did you explore and investigate? Did you engage in any philosophical pursuit to figure out what kind of God might exist? It is nonsense and unwise to suggest that reading the Bible is sufficient to justify atheism on its own.
Thanks, Doug.
Okay.
Have a good day.
You too.
It's a wild thing, because I mean, you were in a position where you're like, hey, it's either all true or none of it's true.
Yep.
And I'm sure I was in that position at some point growing up, where I was just convinced it was all true. And then when we would hear about things, hang on, this doesn't make sense. Or I read this and it's, we're going to punish under the 4th generation. No, we're going to punish under the 10th generation. How do we resolve those potential conflicts? And so this is what apologetics and ministry have been doing for the entirety of Christendom, which is saying, here's the stories as they're related to us. We are convinced they are true, and we are convinced they're true for a number of reasons, not just church tradition, but because we've seen the works in people's lives and we've experienced the Holy Spirit firsthand. And there are going to be errors in Scripture that have nothing to do with salvation or the path to salvation or anything like that. That they can get it wrong that a bat is a bird. They can get it wrong that it's okay to own people as property. They can get it wrong about whether or not the sun stood still in the sky, whether or not the earth was created and formed and populated in 7 literal days or 6 literal days with a day off. All of those things are secondary. We don't have to take Genesis literally. I did. And I think you pretty much do. I don't know where you get original sin if you're not taking it literally, because if original sin came from something other than the literal story, why wouldn't God just tell us the actual story from which original sin came from? And so thinking about these things and looking at them, you find that there are parts of the Bible that absolutely need to be taken seriously and literally, if in fact they were true, because they're relevant to the narrative. This goes from original sin all the way up to the potential redemption of sin by substitutionary atonement, where Jesus comes down and sacrifices himself to himself as a loophole for rules that he's in charge of. That's the way to go about it. And there's, like, when I was a believer, if any agnostic had come up to me and said, hey, the real 10 commandments is in this other chapter,
right,
I would have known right off the bat, it doesn't make any difference what the real 10 commandments, the very notion of the real 10 commandments is antithetical to what the Bible is saying. The fact that we rely on 10 of them when there's 613, which Jews adhere to, there's also the different covenants between the Noahic covenant and the Mosaic covenant as to who's under which sets of rules. It just, granted, I knew more about it, so I would reply, I would have a reaction to someone like our last caller that maybe the average believer wouldn't have. Maybe the average believer, here's the thing. There would be several different categories of Christians. Some who, like me, took it very seriously, studied the Bible in great depth, had beliefs about which parts were literally true, which parts weren't, and had thoughts about apologetics and how to resolve potential conflicts. Then there were people like Paul, who it's all got to be true and none of it's got to be true, understood it, studied it, took it seriously, took it literally. And then when finding problems, they probably poked more cracks in Paul's wall immediately than they did in mine, because Paul's wall was more solid than mine. But let's consider for a second the average Christian, not just the average Christian who happens to call the show, but the average person sitting in the pew in any Christian church on any given Sunday, not the ones who are there every week, and not the ones who are only there on Easter and Christmas, but the ones who are there semi-regularly. Most of them have no clue what's in their Bible, have no clue about the history, have no clue about the authorship, have no clue about potential contradictions, have no clue about apologetics, have no clue about philosophical arguments, about fallacies, anything else. This is a communal effort where they were raised in it or inducted into it. And this is their community. This is their group. This is where they fit. This is where when they pack up and they move to a new town, they have a ready-made community pre-labeled for them. Ooh, Second Baptist Church, that's where I need to go. Ooh, the Bible Pentecostal Church. Ooh, that's where I need to go. And those communities will just welcome them. It is a social structure that has almost nothing to do with any claim or whether or not it's justified. And that is the sad thing, because for Paul and I, it was all about, is this fucking true? Are the claims justified? Because if they're not, I need to find out what the real truth is. Am I worshiping the wrong God? Have I been indoctrinated into something and it turns out it's not true, and I've been aggravating or irritating some other God somewhere else? I think there's a Simpsons bit. It's like, what if we're praying to the wrong God and just pissing off God? Or
it can matter. Yeah.
Yeah. But that was the thing. Most believers, most going to church on Sunday, put on your Sunday best and dress up as if it makes any difference what you're wearing to the God that created you naked. Put on your Sunday best and go out and show off for other people. It's ironic to me that when the Sermon on the Mount talks about going into your prayer closet and don't do your alms in front of people, what happens in church? That is everybody showing off. I was here. I came dressed up. I sang along with everybody else. I stood up when we all stood up. I sat down when we all sat down. I hit my knees when we all hit my knees. And I felt the glory of the Lord. When I don't believe they felt anything. I think it was posturing. I think it was, hey, as a friend of mine said, his buddy was a Pentecostal, and they had to speak in tongues at around the age of 13 in the particular church he was in. And when he got up to speak in tongues before the congregation, he looked at the preacher and says, I don't know what to do. And the preacher said, just fake it. We all do. Now, I have no way of verifying that story is true, but it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest, because there's a common apologetic that is fake it until you make it. This is right up there with Pascal's wager. Pascal acknowledged that belief isn't a choice, and that if you cannot be convinced by the evidence and by the facts, you should continue to act as if you believe, in the hope that someday you would deceive yourself into actually believing. Literally, that's Pascal's wager's second part. But anyway, there's my sermon.
Well, that rolls right into a call that we have. We have Derek from Poland / Warsaw. Derek is an atheist, and he wants to talk about Pascal's wager. So, Derek, welcome to the Sunday show. You're on with Matt and Paul.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Hi, Matt. Hi, Paul.
Hi.
Hey.
So, actually, even though, like, as I said, that I'm an atheist, I wanted to defend Pascal's wager a bit. I hope that's fine.
I'm willing to go along with this, mostly because we're kind of light on calls at the moment. But I'm more baffled at someone who's an atheist calling in to defend Pascal's wager than I am about most things that I've experienced today. And today's been mildly baffling. So what is it you wanted to defend and why?
Well, I can't thoroughly defend it because I would be atheist if I was convinced by it. But I think it's like being maybe not taken in its best formulation sometimes, because for me the most compelling, let's say, thing about it is like it acknowledges that we can't be sure either way whether God exists or not. So it's like quite honest formulation of how things are, at least in my view.
Okay. I have
Mhm.
You're aware that Pascal's wager contrasts either Christianity is true or atheism is true. So the very proposition is already a false
Mhm.
dichotomy. How can you defend a false dichotomy?
Mhm. Well, that's maybe not the best way to put from Pascal's way, yeah? But
That is Pascal's wager. Pascal's wager applies specifically to the Christian God and contrasts it to the state of affairs where no God exists. It ignores all other potential gods. It is a false dichotomy. It's like saying either you're a fan of the Dallas Cowboys or you hate football. That's simply not the only options. So what is it that you find valuable about a false dichotomy?
Okay, that's a good point. And I guess one of the weak points of Pascal's wager are the other religions. But
you don't think that kills it? You don't think that a false dichotomy? See, when we have a logical syllogism, if it's invalid in structure, the conclusion, you can never verify whether the conclusion is true. The conclusion does not follow from the premises. So if you start with Pascal's wager and acknowledge that it's addressing a false dichotomy, that's the end of it. What else is there?
But wouldn't his argumentation still hold if you like change it to either Christian God exists or it doesn't?
No, it's not. It's either the Christian God exists or no God exists. And that's a false dichotomy. It's true. It is just it is just trivially true that either the Christian God exists or it doesn't. That tells you whether or not, it's either true that the number of blades of grass on the planet is even or odd. It has to be one of those. Do you believe it's even?
Yeah.
Nope. Do you believe it's odd? Nope. And so to say you either believe it's even or odd is already a false dichotomy. But to say you either believe it's even or you don't believe there's grass is definitely a false dichotomy. So since it's not just about, let's assume for a second that either the Christian God exists or it doesn't. What conclusion can we draw about whether or not we should believe that the Christian God exists, which is the whole point of Pascal's wager?
So his argument was like the part which I found most interesting, that since we cannot be sure either way, we should like look at the fruits or the results, because I think fruits that we can get. And it wasn't even, I think, the argumentation. We usually focus on this part about afterlife, but I think part of his argument was that you actually get it still in this life, the results, let's say, of belief.
Oh, no. So there's a version of Pascal's wager that is not Pascal's wager, but is an extension of it, where it's, hey, you should believe anyway, because that will put you in a community which is beneficial. But that's true whether there's a God or not, and whether or not you actually actively believe or not. I can go down to the local Baptist church and act like I believe and get all the benefits of being a part of their community. That has nothing to do with whether or not there's a God. Pascal's point is, hey, if you can't be convinced that there's a God, you have to realize either the Christian God's real or he's not. If he's not, you haven't lost anything, which is already a lie, because you've lost the opportunity to seek the truth, which may be that some other God exists, or maybe that no God exists. But if you accept that a God exists, when you accept that you have the right answer, or probably have the right answer, how much time do you spend looking for other right answers?
Yeah, if you are sure about it, then you stop.
Or even if you pragmatically accept that you must do it because I'm trying to avoid maximal hell or best possible heaven, you'll also stop looking for those reasons, according to Pascal, right? You pragmatically stop.
Yeah, you could. And interestingly,
I'm going to stop.
probably,
I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop interrupting you every time you say something that's unfounded or ridiculous or whatever. I want to know, truly, you're an atheist and you called in to defend Pascal's wager. Setting aside anything I've objected to, what's the defense of Pascal's wager as an atheist?
So for me, it's like contrasting it to other theist arguments, it's quite honest, because it acknowledges the limitations of human knowledge. It's kind of putting things as a wager. So in that perspective, I find it quite, let's say, better than the other arguments.
So you find a fallacious argument that begins with a flawed premise and concludes with fake it till you make it to be more compelling than first cause arguments and cosmological arguments and moral arguments?
Yeah, then those three definitely, because I'm totally not convinced by them.
I can't agree with you because, for example, cosmological arguments tend to be valid, but not sound. And so we're addressing premises. You're pointing to an argument that is invalid in structure. And so it doesn't matter what premises you put in there, it's going to be flawed. And I'm just like, how can an argument that says, hey, if you can't believe, fake it, how can that be more compelling? Which God should we fake belief in?
Yeah, that's the problem. Probably the Muslim one, because he is the most punishing, right?
So, Derek, are you doing a version of what the first caller, Doug, did, and that's like you calling in to insult theists with kind of a backhanded compliment, as it were, by saying, well, the best you've got is a fallacious argument, but at least you're honest about not knowing things? Like, because that feels like, as a former theist, that maybe you're just, this feels like a backhand insult as opposed to praise.
No. Come on, don't.
Can you see how someone could take it that way?
Someone could, but I can't help what someone perceives about. Like,
I mean, so I guess what you're saying
this is my honest view. Sorry if somebody takes it.
No, I mean, but it seems like what you like about this is that it's honest in its flaws. And the people who've come to me with Pascal's wager in earnest, who genuinely think that this is a good argument, they're not coming at me with thinking, well, at least this is an honest way to argue. They think it's a genuinely good argument. So maybe I've misunderstood what you're complimenting it on, but it sounds like you're complimenting it on embracing not knowing, or embracing pragmatism, maybe? Or I didn't hear you say pragmatism, but I feel like that actually is the strength of it. Am I mischaracterizing
you could
your
call it
praise?
that way. I mean, praise is like, as I said, yeah, if I was fully convinced, I wouldn't be an atheist. But like,
Okay.
if
What other arguments that are completely fallacious have you bothered to call in and defend anywhere else in the world?
yeah, I was also thinking if it makes sense to make this call, but I will try one more time if you let me. So let's
Go right ahead, although I don't understand. I mean, the point here is, do you make a habit of defending fallacious arguments? If not, then why are you making an exception for this fallacious argument?
I mean, if you like discard something too early, you might make a mistake as well, right?
You trailed off there, Derek. I didn't hear what your last couple sentences were.
Sorry. So I meant if it might happen that you discard something too early without giving it proper consideration.
Do you think defending Pascal's wager is a warning for people to not disregard things too quickly?
Like from my side, if it's a warning.
Okay. How quickly should we disregard fallacious arguments that cannot possibly have conclusions with truth values we can assess? Because my answer to how quickly should we dismiss fallacious arguments is instantly. How many broken calculators are you going to pick up and prove they're broken, but keep trying to work with them?
But maybe you could fix it, no?
Well, then go fucking fix it instead of defending the broken one.
So what about the version of starting with God exists or it doesn't, instead of like
yes,
Christian God or no God?
God exists, either some God exists or no God exists. Which one's correct and how can we know?
So that's the point. We don't know.
Okay. Then the position is then we have no idea whether or not there's a God. Why would we spend any time on fallacious arguments that can't actually solve the issue?
So what Pascal is proposing is to look at it as if it is a game and some kind of wager.
So would you agree that Pascal... Go ahead.
Go ahead. No. I was going to say this is the dumbest thing I've heard all day.
Oh, well, would you agree then that Pascal's appeal is entirely in the consequences, right? Pascal, in order for his wager to make any sense, he has to say that the negative consequences of disbelief are stronger than the negative consequences of belief. So the downside of believing isn't as bad as the downside of not believing. So you'd agree with that, right? That's the point of Pascal's wager? Okay. So then is that not then an argument to go and find the worst possible version of hell? If that carried, wouldn't you extend every religion in the world and you'd be looking at the worst possible afterlife? And that's the one that you should believe in because the consequences are most dire.
Yeah, I am aware of this problem. So.
Yeah, so it doesn't actually lead to it just can't lead to truth. All it is a consequence avoidance. It's hell insurance. Let alone the loophole of obviously an all-knowing God would know that you're faking it. But it just can't lead to truth. But it leads to people. it might be convincing people who are not exposed to religions enough to think that maybe Christian hell is the worst possible hell. And so it seems intuitively true that that's the worst thing they've heard. But yeah, it just I don't know, Derek. It's call back if you had a different point. If you said, "Hey, I have steelmanned, Pascal's wager," and you have a version that you think should be considered, that would be a different call. So if you do that, if you do that homework, you come up with a steelman version, sure, you can call and pitch it. But to just kind of say this one is the least bad of the bad opinions, I mean, we all have our own individual thoughts about which one is least bad. So I think we'll. It sounds like you're kind of pitching it as your opinion, so I think we'll leave it at that, unless you had a final word.
Okay, that's a good challenge. I will try to look if there is some counter arguments about other religions. Maybe there is something.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. Well, Derek, have a good afternoon.
You too.
Oh, cut him off. I assume he's wishing us a good afternoon as well.
I would think so.
All right. Well, we have another atheist in the wings. Let us talk with Steve from the Ukraine. He wants to talk about morality. So, Steve, you are on the Sunday show with Matt and Paul. Welcome.
Hey, what's going on, guys? How are you?
We are well.
Yeah, so
What do you have
I'm
for
not
us
going to
today?
keep the trend of atheists presenting bad faith arguments. This is something I've been toying around with. So I can give you my premises and conclusion, and then you can decide, I guess, if you want to let me extrapolate.
So, for the audience who can't read what the call screener wrote, can you give us before you start your premises, can you give us the one sentence pitch about what you are attempting to demonstrate or prove?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, that morality needs to come from some type of transcendent moral source outside of human subjectivity.
Is it too much for me to ask you to define morality before you go into your premises?
No, I would say ethical standards, right? Like well-being, treatment of human beings, right? I know that sort of delves into the human subjectivity.
Okay,
but
fair enough. So we're going to give you a minute here to, barring anything too egregious, we'll give you a minute here to lay out your thought.
Okay, all right. So for premise one, if moral values are to be objective, even in the absence of human observers, they must be grounded in a transcendent moral source. Premise two, subjective or human-based morality fails to provide such grounding, as it collapses if there are no humans. Conclusion, therefore, objective morality requires a moral lawgiver beyond human subjectivity.
Who said there is, in fact, or should be, or must be objective moral foundations?
Well, I think that if we are going to have some type of standard for morality, right, it should be objective, right? So
well,
if we take something
that's really cool. That's really cool, Steve. But that's wishful thinking. You're basically saying it would be really nice if there was objective standards for morality, but that doesn't mean there are objective standards for morality, and it doesn't mean that we can't have moral agreement and moral understanding without an objective foundation. So your entire argument is rooted in this idea that we need an objective morality or objective moral foundation, and I'd like you to prove that we need an objective moral foundation.
Okay, perfect. If it is subjective, right, if we take something like slavery, right, if we look at the culture during the antebellum South, it was, for some people, culturally acceptable to own people as property. I believe, right, the three of us would think that is egregious. And thankfully, our
You're
legal
you're
system
aware
has.
you're aware that egregious is not synonymous with objective morality.
Yeah, and by the way,
I
the fact
yeah.
that there were people who were okay with slavery and people who were not okay with slavery pretty much demonstrates that neither of them are appealing to an objective moral foundation.
Yeah, that's actually super fair.
Okay. So I'm still wondering, where's the demonstration that there must be an objective moral foundation? Because I've lectured on this subject, and I have a number of proposed foundations and understandings for morality that do not require or depend upon any objective source. What they require or depend upon is agreement that what we care about, I don't care if you call it morality, I care about the well-being of humans and others, but humans to begin with. And whether or not that's moral, I don't give a shit. I could not possibly care less if somebody thinks that caring about humans is not objectively moral. I never said it was. I said I do care about humans, and I would like to work with other people who care about humans to figure out what is in fact the best way to live, given we're going to begin with well-being of humans. Because it is true that you and I, as far as we can tell, share a reality, and that there are non-subjective facts about that reality that dictate what actions are going to have consequences that are bad for us, neutral for us, or good for us. Cutting off someone's head, generally speaking, is bad for them. There may be some scenario where it's good for them, but generally we would agree that if we're going to talk about well-being, cutting off someone's head almost all the time is bad for their well-being. And that's not a subjective opinion. That is an objective assessment based on the facts of reality. And so if we're going to say we care about well-being, it should be pretty easy for us to say, you don't get to cut off. It would be wrong, whether you want to call it immoral or unethical or bad or whatever. It would be wrong to cut off someone's head without some justification that you are in fact improving their well-being. Can we not agree on that?
Yeah, I think we absolutely could agree on that.
Cool. Then
And
what need
Steve,
do I have for someone saying there's some objective foundation out there that says it's wrong to cut off someone's head?
I suppose you don't, right? I think the line of thought that I was going down is, if you'll forgive the expression, is like Schrodinger's murderer, right? Where if I was in front of a coffin and there was either a body that I murdered in that coffin or there was nothing, you wouldn't be able to say whether or not I was moral or immoral at any given time, because there was no way to demonstrate until you open the coffin that there was in fact a murder victim and I have committed something that was against that person's well-being. Does that make sense?
No. How does that
But
say
no,
that or that there demonstrate that it's even possible for there to be an objective foundation for morality?
That's even possible. I don't know if I can on this call, but
Steve, why do you think that I
maybe if
asked
you
you
give
the
me some
definition of Steve? Why do you think I asked you the definition of morality up front?
definition of terms, getting on the same page.
Right. And when you said morality has something to do with well-being and flourishing, that I just said, well, cool, carry on. Right? Because you were defining something to be in relation to two things, well-being and flourishing. So you were already appealing to something that we can score against, right? You were saying we can score what is moral against well-being and flourishing.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay. So because the three of us on this call agreed that that's a good scoring system, then the three of us are going to agree in general terms about what gets a good score and what gets a bad score. Right?
Yeah.
So in
that'd be
that way, it's objective. In the same way, Matt often talks about chess. In the same way, the rules of chess must be agreed upon by the players, otherwise, it's not a coherent game. So, but when all the players agree, then you can objectively assess, the strength or weakness of a move. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would agree.
So the objectiveness only comes in the agreement. Does that make sense to you?
The objectiveness only comes in the agreement. Yeah,
It's
that's
only
fair.
So,
that is fair.
right.
Yeah.
So if I played chess by some other house rules that don't don't apply to you, then we're not playing the same game. Okay, so I know it feels intuitively like there should be something objective about morality, and it seems like you're trying desperately just to defend your intuition about that. Am I wrong? Like it sounds,
I think that's right. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, what Matt was trying to say was, let go of that intuition and let go of that need, because the better position is to come to agreement that well-being and flourishing are the goals, and that's when meaningful discussions can happen once you've come to that agreement. If someone doesn't come to that agreement with you, then you're just never going to align anyway, right? Like, so someone comes to me and says morality is whatever God says, then I'm like, cool, we're not going to be able to have a meaningful conversation about whether something is moral.
Right.
So I would encourage you to let go of the need for that, defending that intuition.
Okay. Yeah. I appreciate it. This has been actually very helpful.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Steve, for calling in, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. Thank you.
Bye. Sorry to jump in on the end there, Matt, but I felt like I knew where his hang up was, because it was a similar hang up that I had. That need to justify that intuition and the attack when people think that you are being immoral. I get why that hurts you, the feelings, but you gotta kind of step out of it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where when we have those kind of conversations, quite frankly, it's like somebody will say, "Oh, a man who has sex with another man is immoral." And when you're having a discussion about this, you can say, "Oh, well, that's because of the objective foundation of, Almighty God," which, okay, even if there is a God, that's still subjective on your part that I should give a shit what that God thinks, or that God is in fact right. It doesn't matter whether or not that God is actually going to judge, because we're talking about how humans should judge and evaluate things. So one of the most common questions is, who is actually being harmed? If two consenting adults who love each other engage in romantic loving activities, how could their gender possibly be relevant to whether or not their action is moral or immoral? You'd have to show that there is something being done that violates some standard. I don't care about your proposed God standard, and I probably wouldn't care about God's standard if God showed up himself and said, "Here's my standard," because my standard is rooted in humanism. It is rooted in empathy, evidence. It is rooted in equality and freedom. And those are the things that I'm convinced lead to better lives. If I'm wrong, you can convince me by showing how your views lead to a better life. And I'll change my mind. But you're not going to find a way to convince me that, oh, I heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend that God doesn't like fags. Because that's the Westboro Church thing. That's their sign. That's what they're saying. And they are on better biblical grounds than all of the gay-friendly churches out there. And yet I agree with the gay-friendly churches way more than I'm going to agree with Westboro. Now, how do you solve that? If you have different people who have different things that they're going to point to say, ooh, this is better, ooh, this is better, this is better. How does pointing to your God solve any of that? It doesn't. What it does is it inspires an entire collection of people to be intellectually lazy and morally deficient because they do not understand why something is wrong or how to defend whether or not something is wrong. And so it just becomes, this is what the church said, this is what the church said, this is what God said, this is what God said. And nobody has to ever demonstrate that God ever said anything or that God is in fact right. And so far, I have no reason to think that God's ever said anything or that God, if he said something, is in fact correct. And the truth of anything that's claimed, whether it comes from God or a person, stands and falls on its own merits, not the source. But
All right. Well,
my
we're
apologies for the F slur. I hope everybody understands I was specifically referencing the hate mongers and not actually going down that road myself.
I understood, but good clarification. It seems like we have calls piggybacking on each other today, Matt. We have a theist caller. Welcome. Oh, I have to click on the button. Welcome Sam to the show. Sam is a theist who wants to insist that Pascal's wager is not a false dichotomy. And Sam is from California. Welcome to the show. You're on the Sunday show with Matt and Paul. Let us know how we're wrong, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, the last call was interesting. Like, you guys don't even accept more realism to be true, which is pretty, weird to me. But anyways, yeah. So obviously, Pascal's wager is not going to be a false dichotomy, right? You guys kept talking about pragmatism. Obviously, it's a pragmatic argument, right? It's not going to be a metaphysical claim. So even Pascal himself, like, obviously he was like a staunch Christian, but that doesn't take away from the fact that obviously through his entire work, he talked about how God's knowledge would be completely unknowable, right? So for example, in Penn State,
So hang on. Pascal's wager suggests that God either is or is not, correct?
Generally, yeah.
Okay, I don't know why there's a generally yeah, but the assertion of Pascal begins with God either is or is not. And that is a true dichotomy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Cool. And then he goes on to say, if you believe in God, you gain everything. And if you don't, you lose everything, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. How do we know that it's true? For whatever God is real, that belief is the criteria it uses to determine if you gain everything. Does that model apply to God, to all gods, or does it primarily apply to Christian gods and similar gods that hold belief in some models as the foundation?
Right. So I don't feel like
does that apply?
Does
that apply to all gods? Yes or no?
To all gods, I don't know what that would mean, but sure. I guess if you're talking about religions, no, obviously it wouldn't.
No, I'm sorry, Sam. This is really simple. Please try to follow. This is really simple. Pascal's claim is that if you believe, you stand to gain everything, and if you don't believe, you stand to lose everything, correct?
Yes.
Is that true for a God that does not require belief to reward someone in an afterlife? The answer is no. There's zero. There should be zero.
No, that wouldn't.
Then the answer is fucking no. If a God does not require belief to warrant its beneficial afterlife, then that claim does not apply to that God, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, of course. But
which means it's a false fucking dichotomy, as I said, because not all God models necessarily have belief as the justification for gain. And if you believe in the wrong God, you may lose access to the right God, which means you don't necessarily stand to gain all if you believe, and you don't necessarily stand to lose all if you believe. In fact, there are some where if you believe in the wrong God, you will in fact lose all. If some God other than the Christian God is real, and their criteria is, I don't want gullible shitheads who are willing to bend over and take it from a fictional God without using their brain. So I'm only going to reward people who can spot logical fallacies and circular arguments and false dichotomies. And those are the people I'm going to reward with a good afterlife. If that God exists, then believing in Jesus has made you lose everything. That's why it's a false dichotomy. It sets up a binary situation, which is not actually binary.
Yeah. So I don't feel like that's not a defeater to Pascal's wager though. That
Okay,
would
then
we could
you're
just put it
then
into
you are
like
no, I'm going to mute you. Then you are either a liar, an idiot, or a troll, because I just got you to acknowledge. Here, I'll tell you what. Let's try this. Sam, what is a false dichotomy, and is it fallacious?
a false dichotomy. Yeah. So false dichotomy would be when you give someone two options, which obviously there's more than two options, right? So
Okay, so hang on. Let's try this again. Is a false dichotomy fallacious in argumentation?
am I muted? No. I mean, yes, it is. It is fallacious.
Okay. Is it a false dichotomy to say either if you believe in a God, you will gain everything, and if you don't, you will lose everything? Is that a false dichotomy?
Not necessarily. No.
No, it is necessarily. It is necessarily because it's a universal declaration. And I've already pointed out that there could be a God model that does not require belief, correct?
Right, but that's just
Are you
right.
saying,
Like,
are you saying, Sam, are you saying that it is absolutely impossible for there to be a God that rewards intellect instead of belief?
well, when it comes to the theistic model,
I'm sorry, Sam.
yes,
I'm
it's
sorry,
impossible.
Sam. I'm
But you're
sorry,
providing,
Sam. I'm sorry, Sam, but you're not going to do that shit. Are you saying that it is impossible for there to be a God that rewards intellect over belief or morality over belief? Are you saying that those are impossible?
in general, no, but we could rule them
Okay,
out,
then
right? But
stop. These are
besides
no, sir. You don't get to speak in anything other than yes or no responses for a moment, because you've declared that this wasn't a false dichotomy, and I'm going to show you and everybody watching that it is in fact a true false dichotomy by your own admission. If it is not the case that it is impossible for there to be gods that do not have belief as their criteria, then the statement that if you believe, you stand to gain everything, and if you don't believe, you stand to lose everything, that is not true, because it does not apply to all God models, correct?
all God models. Yeah, I mean, sure, we could say that. Yeah.
Cool. So no. Here we go. So if the statement does not apply to all God models, it is establishing a false dichotomy because it is omitting other options, correct?
Okay, no, it's not. Again, I'm
No,
trying to
sir.
get this point out.
No, sir. I'm going to do this one more time. And this will be the last time I do this. I have hand walked you up to the fucking river so you can acknowledge that you were wrong. And maybe once you acknowledge you were wrong, you can then redeem yourself by saying, yes, it's a false dichotomy, but the purpose was to show only a defense of Christianity in particular, in which case I would agree with you, because I'm the one that studied the fuck out of this and did videos on it as the very first thing on my channel. But when I say, is it a false dichotomy to falsely suggest that there's an either or when there are actually multiple options? Is that a false dichotomy? Yes or no?
You're putting me in a box. What am I supposed to do?
Yes, I'm putting you in a box because you said it's not a false dichotomy when it fucking is.
It's not.
Answer the question.
No.
So answer the fucking question. Is it a false dichotomy when a position is presented as having only two options when there are multiple options? Yes or no?
Yes, that would be a false dichotomy.
Is it the case that Pascal's wager offers only two options when there are more? Yes or no?
Well, when it comes to Pascal's wager,
Okay. The answer is yes, you dishonest fuck. See, here's the thing. A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. That's the transitive property. We're going to teach you some basic logic and math, since you are either a lying troll or you are stupid. Either way, you're going to benefit from this, and so will people out there. If it is a false dichotomy to present that there are two options when there are 17, and Pascal's wager presents that there are two options when there are 17, then by the transitive property, Pascal's wager is a false dichotomy. What about what I just said is incorrect?
yeah. Okay, so Pascal's wager obviously is enforcing the belief or not belief, right? And
No. The question I just asked you is what about what I just said is incorrect? Let me try this again. If there are more than two options and an argument presents only two options, that is a false dichotomy. Does Pascal's wager present only two options when there are more options, yes or no?
in the case of Pascal's wager, no.
You're a liar? That's a yes or no question. Pascal's wager presents only two options when you yourself have already acknowledged there are others. There could be a God that does not reward belief, but instead rewards morality or intellect, or doesn't have any criteria for reward. Maybe there's a God out there that wants everybody in an afterlife. Those are all other options that Pascal's wager ignores. If you don't have any objections, I think I'm done with the liar.
I have no objections. Feel free to drop Sam.
Goodbye, Sam. Okay.
Yeah, he probably shouldn't have been quite as specific in what he was claiming he was going to prove, since he was trying to prove something else. But we have other theist calls to get to, so let's go with the one who's been waiting the longest, and we're going to talk with Jake from Florida. Welcome to the Sunday Show. You're on with Matt and Paul.
Sorry, bad joke. Welcome, Jake. Sorry.
How are you guys doing?
We're doing all right. You are wanting to demonstrate that there must be a God. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's not, I mean, it's kind of clickbait, but it's not. I think I can, so I'm going to try, though. So I have a hard time explaining, like looking at the modern cosmological models, the Big Bang models that they have. I'm not saying those are true, but whatever. Either way, how do we explain, like, localized decreases of entropy turning into, like, pterodactyls? Like, doesn't that sound absurd?
Where do we have an example of a localized decrease in entropy becoming a pterodactyl?
Well, that's kind of, I'm sorry, that's kind of clickbait too. That's kind of a sarcasm. So,
okay, I'm going to mute you for a second, and I shouldn't be doing this because Paul should be running the soundboard. But in order to make this call even remotely valuable, you're calling in to say you can prove there must be a God in the universe with science. Science creates testable, falsifiable models of reality that are independently verified and represent the best findings and most accurate models. They don't necessarily claim that they're true. When you say, when your case begins with, how do we explain this? That's not an argument, and that's not evidence. That's a question. And when you say, how do we explain how a local decrease in entropy results in a pterodactyl? There's a couple different ways to respond to that. One is how I did, which is, who's saying that a local decrease in entropy results in a pterodactyl? And then you admit, okay, that was an exaggeration. Cool. Let's drop the fucking exaggerations because they're a waste of everybody's time. And they put me in this position where I have to be this pedantic teacher taking kindergarten level apologists, hand walking them up to where they need to be. The other way to address your question is to say, I don't know. Do you know? And how do you know? So whatever your point is, tell us what you know and how you know it. That's it.
so the current model that's accepted is that the original state of the universe was energy dominant, which means no matter.
Jake, I don't need you to fucking give me a lesson on the current state of the universe. I need you to tell us what you believe, why you believe it. I need you to explain what scientific thing you're going to use to confirm that there's a God and how you know that that's correct. I don't need a dissertation on what the current model is because the current model could be wrong. We're not making any proclamations. And whatever currently is independent from whether or not there's a good reason to believe in a God. So please stop tap dancing and tell us what you're using to confirm a God and how you know it is true.
Can you shut up and let somebody talk?
Okay, I'm going to mute you. Let me explain this again, Jake. This is a call-in show where you're saying that you're a theist and that you can prove there must be a God in the universe with science. We tried to let you do that, and then you admitted it may be a little clickbait, that may be a bit of an exaggeration. And then when I tried to get you back on track the first time, you decided that you wanted to talk about what the current model is. The current model is irrelevant to what justification you would have. Let's ignore it. Let's pretend we don't know. We don't need any current model. We don't know. We have no reason at all, no scientific findings, no understanding, and no attempted understanding of why the universe exists. And you think you know. When you say, can I shut up and let other people talk? Yes, I fucking can. As we've seen in most of the other calls, and from any caller who will honestly answer a question and stop wasting my motherfucking time. So here we go again. Jake, I'm going to unmute you. Without whining, without, can you let somebody talk? I need you to say, here's why I think belief in God is justified, and then present it. Begin.
Yeah, you're just objectively a douchebag, dude. Seriously.
Sorry, Jake. That's that's not really helpful for our audience or the conversation. They can. Our audience is free to make
the audience, right?
Yeah.
Our
Let's
audience
ban
is
that
free.
caller. I done it. I banned that caller. Jake, you won't be calling back in from that number.
Our audience is free to make their own decisions about whether Matt or I are useful people. They can, and you're free to do that and have your own opinion. The callers, they don't need to have the weigh in on the callers on that. So we will. Sorry, Jake. Oh well. Fortunately, we have a few others
from State Farm. It'd be a little bit less of a waste of time.
All right. Well, let's do a little bit of a refresh or reset. We have a couple more theist callers. We're going to start with Joe. Joe, who SC, I believe, as this Canadian, I believe it's South Carolina. Welcome, Joe. You're on the Sunday show with Matt and Paul.
Hey, thank you. We spoke a few weeks ago, Matt, I think, and you pointed me to a resource, the talkorigins.com resource with a whole bunch of answers about creationism and stuff. But so thanks for that. I got to check that out a little bit. I was calling in because when I turned on, I heard you guys talk about morality and the grounding for that. I listened to another, I know he's sort of a friend of yours, at least an acquaintance, Justin over at DZ Debate.
He's going to be on the show with me this Wednesday, but I don't know him. I don't think we've ever done anything together, but he'll be on my show Wednesday.
Okay. Well, so he got an interesting conversation, and I'm just interested in what you might tweak about this with a caller. And it was a very civil conversation, and he basically admitted that his view on morality not having a definite grounding does suck, because not his view sucks, but just the reality of what they came down to, because ultimately it's basically just pitting one person's preference over another person's preference, and you just end up with might makes right at that point. Now, actually, I'm sorry, that's dishonest. He did not say might makes right. He ended with that it ends up being one person's preference against another person's preference. So I'm adding the might makes right. But
Joe,
would you be able to tweak that or tweak my understanding of what he may have said?
did you listen to my previous answer on morality and objective versus subjective foundations?
I got badly interrupted at I listened to the very beginning, and then I got interrupted and finished at the end. So I probably missed the most important spot of what you said.
I'm probably not gonna rehash all of that just now, but also,
Okay.
I don't know Justin, so I have no thoughts on what Justin's position is. I certainly am not gonna to respond to a hearsay account of Justin's position, but it
Fair
says
enough.
here that you think that God is the best grounding for morality. How can something which we cannot demonstrate exists and we cannot demonstrate has ever spoken a word to anyone about morality be the best grounding for morality? If I'm not going to address Justin's argument based on hearsay, why should I care what hearsay I have about what God says?
Well, I mean, I think that God has spoken. God has spoken
Okay,
through His Word.
prove it. Prove it.
I believe that Christ fulfilled
I
hundreds of
don't
prophecies.
care what you believe, Joe. I don't care what you believe, Joe. I care what you can prove. See, the thing is, let's
Okay.
say there's two secular atheists and they disagree on
Mhm.
morality. Oh my gosh, it becomes might makes right. No, it doesn't. If we can come to agreement on that, what we're talking about being well-being or whatever, we can then make objective assessments about the consequences of actions with respect to a goal. And it doesn't matter whether that goal was pulled out of a hat, pulled out of somebody's ass, 2 people agreed, 20 people agreed, or somebody wrote it down in a book. And it doesn't matter if somebody said God said it. All of them are all equally flawed as a foundation. Because if you just say, oh, I believe in the biblical God's view of morality, well, first of all, the biblical God's view of morality isn't consistent, isn't understood, isn't able to be pointed to the actual God if there is one. And people who read the Bible do not agree on moral foundations. They do not agree on what is or isn't moral or what applies at different times. So there is no objection to secular morality that can possibly be solved by appealing to a God, because from my perspective, God isn't an objective source. I have no information of that any God has ever said anything, or that if they have said something, that it is in fact right. So all you're doing is stating what your opinion is, and that your foundation for your opinion is something that we don't give a fuck about, and that is objectively wrong when we consider the well-being of human creatures. Because objectively, if we value the well-being of humans, slavery is immoral, the Bible supports slavery, therefore the Bible is supporting something that's immoral. However, even if the Bible said slavery is immoral, that wouldn't prove that the Bible is a good foundation for morality. It would just prove that that one is in agreement with us. Where is the objective that we can all verify?
Okay, so that you said a lot and you asked a couple of questions. I'll start with this last one. What is the objective that we can all verify? Obviously, if we're coming at humanity from vastly different points of view, that's where the confusion comes in.
So basically, the argument is that if you agreed with me, you'd agree with me, which is still a subjective thing.
Right. Right, but I mean, people can disagree about even something as concrete as mathematics. Wouldn't you agree that people don't always agree about?
Yes, but we can demonstrate they're wrong because mathematics is non-subjective.
Okay, right, but I mean, brilliant mathematicians can disagree with each other and think that they are demonstrating the other one wrong.
Okay.
And come to a stalemate in their understanding of.
At no point is any of this relevant. All you're doing is continuing to admit that even in a field where there is objective foundation, there can still be disagreement and there can still be unknowns. So you're objecting to something, proposing a solution that cannot ever serve as a solution and is already a weaker objective. As a matter of fact, there's nothing objective about saying, here's what God thinks, because how can you demonstrate to me what God thinks?
I can demonstrate to you from an infallible source that can predict the future, that can be scientifically accurate 3,500 years before the things were discovered. Those would give us very good clues that this book has something authoritative to say.
The fact that you think something predicted something else, does that prove it's an infallible moral source?
Well, generally,
that's a yes or no question.
Something, then yes. Well, if that's my only options, I'll just say yes.
If you think something successfully predicted something else, that means it's an infallible source.
Since you only gave me those two options, so I'm stuck.
So I want to know how the world survived before you decided that something correctly predicted something else, because it's your decision that makes it an objective, an infallible source. How did you become the cornerstone of infallibility?
I did not become the cornerstone of infallibility.
You just said you did.
The world survived.
You just said you did. You just said you did, because I said, if you believe that something successfully predicted something else, does that mean it's an infallible source? And you said yes. So you put your own view of the reliability of a claim as the criteria by which we can judge it to be infallible. I reject your criteria.
Okay, so to start off, you're 10 times smarter than me, 10 times better at conversation, but you're like pushing and shoving.
Joe, I'm going to back away now, because it doesn't matter who's smarter. So the argument isn't contingent on who's smarter. It doesn't matter who's better at talking. It doesn't matter how many times I've done this. The facts are the fucking facts, and things are objective or subjective when they're objective or subjective. And the fact that you look at a book and say, "Ooh, it predicted this," doesn't mean that it actually predicted it. You are fundamentally wrong about that to begin with. It doesn't mean that it was an accurate prediction. It doesn't mean that the person who said something knew what they were predicting or had any knowledge of the future. You haven't ruled out coincidence. You haven't ruled out interpretation. And in any case, the mere fact that a source correctly predicted something doesn't make it infallible. Just as I'm going to correctly predict that I will interrupt again. Oh, I'm also going to correctly predict, here we go. I'm going to correctly predict that you don't hear another word from me for the rest of the call. And when we're done, you can let people know if that means I'm infallible. Paul?
Yeah, so...
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay. Hey, so, I think Matt knows that that prediction that he just made is not nearly as impressive as a prediction 500 years in advance of the type of torture, rejection, death, and resurrection that Jesus predicted.
Joe, I have made many videos about why Bible prophecy, in my limited view, is garbage. There's lots of criteria. You have to have it be predicted, definitely predicted before. It has to be answerable to a single verifiable occurrence. It has to clearly be intended to be a prediction. And again, these might not be your criteria, but they're mine, right? Like, and the people weren't effectively trying to make it happen. That's why you're laughing at Matt's prediction, because it's something he could potentially make happen. It has to, there's all these criteria potentially out there. We could talk about that for days, and if that was what you wanted to call about, we could talk about whether you and I agree that the Bible has even one fulfilled prophecy in it. I don't think it does, and I've studied it a lot. But let's grant that the Bible has dozens and dozens of predictions of things that happened hundreds and thousands of years later, and that there was definitely not a great human reason why that could have happened. Let's just set that aside for a second. I'll grant it for the sake of the argument. How would that tell me that the God of the Bible is good grounding for morality?
Well, so that would be a good foundation for figuring out, is the God of the Bible real? Is he trustworthy? Does he actually have the power and the knowledge to understand the future and understand the past? And if he does have all of those things, then we could trust him when he says that he alone created the heavens and the earth, that he was the one who created man in his image, and that he is the one who gets to set the moral principles by which we live.
Okay, so
that would be my grounding.
Gets to set is essentially, basically, you're advocating for God made it, so he gets to make the rules. Is that basically? And maybe
that's part of it. An example of that would be like Christ saying that he is Lord of the Sabbath, and so he can break the Sabbath, which was given to them as a sign and a symbol, but most of the rules are a reflection directly of his nature. And so, as an example, go ahead. I don't want to be rude.
Is your understanding of morality that it is authoritarian based?
Yeah.
Or is it? Yeah. Sorry, did you say yes?
I did. Yes, I believe that. The creator of the universe has the right to tell us what to do.
Okay, so would you then agree that the creator of the universe would have the right to tell us what to do, even if those commands were not moral? Could there be an immoral creator of the universe?
Could there? That's a really tough hypothetical. No, not according to my understanding. No. I guess that comes down to
I'm not asking.
Definition of morality you provide.
I'm not asking if the Christian God is that such a thing. What I'm saying is it plausible that there is an all-powerful being that is not simultaneously all moral?
Plausible, no.
Why?
Because again, the Word of God, which corresponds to history and the future.
No. You're describing our universe. I'm saying, is there a possible universe where it was created by a God who is not all moral?
The God of the Bible says that he knows of no other God.
The God of the Bible is not you're talking about our universe again. Are hypotheticals off the table with you, Joe? Are you not willing to talk about hypotheticals?
I just don't. I think that's a good way for me to get boxed in a corner without even really knowing what is being said. Like, I can't possibly study or know the answer to a lot of hypothetical questions. Could you make it simpler so that it's not so far-fetched?
Well,
as a completely different universe, completely different.
Joe, you just told me that the Bible contains scientific truths, and that it contains prophecies, and that it is inerrant. That, to me, is the most far-fetched thing I can possibly imagine. And I've studied it a lot. Because I've studied it a lot, and it does not hold up. So I'm just saying, but I can entertain. I'm just demonstrating that I can entertain here. I can even go with you that what you're saying is true. I can entertain a hypothetical that I think is utterly on its face ridiculous for the sake of having a discussion.
I see where you're coming from.
So despite the fact that you think that in practicality my hypothetical is ridiculous, you aren't even seeming willing to acknowledge that it is a possible thing that is logically possible. There's nothing logically incoherent with a immoral creator God. Is there?
Okay, I'm not exactly sure where this is going, but I will for the sake of conversation, I will say, yeah, there could be somewhere an immoral creator God.
Okay. That in that universe is the word of that immoral creator a good basis for morality?
I guess it would depend what what all that creator has said. If he has just said do this and there's no consequences.
No. Joe, you said to me that the basis of morality is the authority of the person who made it. The person who makes the universe gets to set the rules.
Okay.
You said that, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So in the universe where an immoral God sets the rules, are those rules moral?
So I think not, because I think there's something wrong with the definition of moral that we're using in this conversation.
Very good, because that's where I was trying to get to. Awesome. So what you and I are agreeing on is that there has to be a definition of morality that has nothing to do with what an authoritarian person says or doesn't say. Right? The way we judge morality is not based on what someone says.
Okay, I can go with you on that.
So when we say, is God, the Bible, the best grounding for morality, the way we evaluate that is not on whether the person who manufactured us said it. It's based on some other criteria. That's what you seem to be now agreeing to.
Yeah, wow, this is a really deep conversation. This is pretty cool. You're making me think about things I haven't thought about before. So I think morality has to, and I may be backpedaling. I'm trying to not be dishonest and skip around. I'm genuinely trying to deal with what you're saying. So forgive me if I seem to be backpedaling. I'm genuinely trying to be honest. I think morality must have something to do with the nature of reality itself, which has to do, obviously, from my perspective, with the nature of God himself. And since reality, again, I'm coming from my view, since reality comports with a morally good and upright God, then morality has to do, it does have to do with the nature of this particular being. Not in another universe it might not, but in this universe it has to do with the nature of the being.
So you understand that that's purely an assertion, because because you and I have already gone through the hoop that reality in a different reality isn't necessarily moral, and you are absolutely backtracking. You've gone back to now that I'm asserting that we live in scenario A when scenario B, C, D, E, F are possible. There's no way you could possibly know that we're living in a world where the God is actually moral if what you're doing is just saying that the God is.
Right, but I guess have a little sympathy for me, because there's no way I could possibly be prepared to talk about a God in a different universe.
Let me have sympathy with you, and let's go with your other statement that said morality has something to do with reality. Why and what? Why must morality have something to do with reality?
Because it appears that the God who has spoken to us about morality has also created the universe in such a way
we've already established, though, that an immoral God could create these very same physics that we have. An immoral God can make the same physics.
Yeah, I think I disagree with that, because I think, like physics, just the whole idea of every action creates an equal and opposite reaction. Like that's a
moral statement to you? That's a
not a moral statement. That's a physical statement, but it speaks of justice. It speaks of like this fairness of actions and consequences.
Okay, hold on.
That plays into the idea of, okay.
Despite this is incredibly silly to me, let me go to you. Why did you just appeal to justice and our fairness and things like that as trying to tell me demonstrate whether something's moral or not?
I think because morality has to do with justice and fairness.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Morality has to do with justice and fairness. Those are the things that we test. That's what right? So actually what you've done now, I hope if you play back this call, what you've done now and said is in order to demonstrate whether something's real, I'm appealing to an ethic. I'm appealing to a principle. And Matt and I in the previous call talked about the well-being and harm and things like that, right? But those are, and you just appealed to justice and to I forget what the other adjective there was. Those are the principles.
Fairness.
Fairness. Thank you. By which that's how we ground morality. We ground morality in, is something fair? Does something cause harm? Those are things that if we agree that that's what morality means, has to do something to do with well-being and fairness and equity, then we don't actually need a God in the picture to evaluate morality, right? And it absolutely nothing to do with physics. It has nothing to do with equal and opposite reactions. It has nothing to do with, whether A equals A, laws of non-contradiction things. Morality is, you just appealed to justice and ethics and fairness. That is what morality is. And even in a world, even in a universe with a God who is immoral, we would still be able to appeal to justice, and we'd still be able to appeal to empathy as a scorecard by which we evaluate actions. Would you not agree?
Well, I think we appeal to those things because we're made in the image of the God who actually exists. I think if you look at the animal kingdom,
that's not why I appeal.
They couldn't care less.
Right, but that's not why I appeal to it. So, I appeal to, I have empathy. I can imagine that things that I dislike, other people dislike. I don't like being murdered. I don't like people taking my stuff. So I can imagine that other people don't like it. And I can also extrapolate that if I steal other people's stuff, they're going to steal mine. So it's not even that I care about them. It's just selfishly, I don't want other people stealing my stuff. These are things we can appeal to that have nothing to do with what the motives of our creator was, right?
I don't agree with that. Again, I believe that that's the imago Dei stamped on every one of us. That, again, we are completely unique from the animal kingdom.
So the only reason I don't like my stuff being taken is because there's a moral God.
No, definitely that's not what I said. But the appeal, so yes, a very utilitarian morality that can be had apart from a moral lawgiver.
Okay,
but that's not what we have. I don't think that.
Okay, maybe you're going to go there. So demonstrate to me, and no one ever has. So I would love it if you were the first person. Demonstrate that we have anything other than utilitarian morality.
I think that we know instinctively that.
So that's just intuition. That was the earlier call that you called against, where I ended the call saying, "Is this all about your intuition?" You remember that caller? That was how I ended it. Is this about discomfort with your intuition?
I think you'll agree with me on this next point, though. I think I'm going to say something that you'll agree with. I could be wrong. I'll stop it where I'll stop talking where I think that you're going to agree with me to see if you do or don't.
Wants to make a bet. I think I'm not. Matt's betting that he knows what you're going to say. I think, but we'll see what happens. He's miming something.
Let's see if we can make another impressive prediction. So I think that you would agree with me that it is praiseworthy in our society. All societies value somebody laying down their life for someone else. and there is nothing utilitarian about that.
Of course, there's things utilitarian about that. If I lay down my life, Matt, I think you want to bet. I'm not sure what the. Okay, so Matt, you can tell me in the side chat what you want to literally. There's many reasons to lay down your life for things, and one of them is biology. The ability for me to propagate my genes into eternity is absolutely served if I protect my children from being harmed. If I throw myself in front of the lion, right?
Yep.
There's lots of pragmatic
but
reasons.
That's not what I'm talking about. Yeah, I'm talking about a young, healthy.
No. You're. but the reason why we like that. There's the reasons why we like that is because that serves all the rest of us. If someone else throws themselves in front of a lion, it's very easy to understand why that would be praised, because he's done something in action of the tribe. Like I'm saying,
well, if a healthy young man threw himself in front of a lion just to protect a 70-year-old lady, would we all scoff at him and say, "What an idiot! He didn't do the math"?
Some people would.
Would you really scoff at him and say he was actually a bad person because that was not in the best interest of human flourishing, because the old lady was not going to reproduce and couldn't work, etc., but the young man could? Would he actually be would he be an immoral person for doing that?
Well, that part, actually, I think that's an amoral move. I don't think there's a moral or an immoral aspect. Self-sacrifice is not required. It's neither moral nor amoral, or moral nor immoral. I think it's amoral. But the fact that we find it praiseworthy is entirely understandable without a God. That's all I'm saying. I don't need to appeal to a God.
I don't understand your explanation for why my scenario would be praiseworthy without a God.
Because we are a social species, right? Anything that serves our tribe serves the individual, and vice versa. Our survival advantage is that humans, we're not the strongest, we're not the best swimmers, we're not the best runners, our survival advantage is entirely in our working together. There's other social species as well. So in a social species, any sacrifice is very understandable to be praiseworthy.
But that sacrifice did not help the community. It was helping one individual who was probably, in most communities, would actually just be a burden to the community.
That's because you're coming up with a specific hypothetical, but that doesn't erase why it's generally considered to be a virtue, right? Sacrifice as a virtue is incredibly explainable. The fact that you come up with one scenario that through some kind of loophole, if people were thinking through this, as opposed to just acting on instinct, why they may not care, or why it may not follow. But that doesn't erase why we think that it's a virtue.
But don't you see how that derails, though, the utilitarian moral ethic? That if this is purely based on what is going to help humanity as a whole, or the tribe as a whole, then one healthy person laying down their life for an unhealthy person is actually immoral. If that's your definition of morality, is the tribal flourishing, then that young man is actually committing an immoral act by sacrificing himself for the old lady.
Oh, possibly, and under that criterion, I've actually described it here as amoral. I think that it is neither immoral nor moral. But the fact that it's praiseworthy is incredibly unexplainable in a utilitarian framework. The fact why the virtue of sacrifice.
I respectfully disagree that I don't see how you've proven that is amoral. If it's moral to, what the man did was not a good mathematical calculation.
Well, there is So it gets very complicated because there's game theory involved here, right? Because you need to. It's not as simple as what's good for you. You have to actually have a balance of selfishness and um, both preserving your genes. You have to have selfish genes as well as care for the tribe, and there's always an intersection of where that's a break-even point. That's more than I think is in the realm of what we're going to talk about here. I guess I'm still waiting to hear. So you're telling me the gap is that you can come up with a handful of examples where what is generally considered virtue through some loophole doesn't actually appeal to why that thing was originally considered to be generally virtuous?
Well, so I don't think that's a very tiny loophole. I think that's a huge swath of self-sacrifice. I mean, it's well known. I mean, healthy parents all the time will sacrifice for a child
Right,
they know is not going to live out the night.
No, but you understand that
it's very normal. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Again, you're just finding specific examples that are loopholes in the general principle. The general principle
I'm just saying your general principle is broken, and so it's very easy to find holes. Whereas my principle upholds both the healthy person sacrificing himself for an unhealthy, as well as an unhealthy sacrificing for the healthy. I don't see how your principle of morality can possibly uphold to that.
Because we're not actually going to agree on whether that's a moral action or not. That's why because this is part of morality is that obviously different people are going to have different conclusions about specific actions as opposed to general actions.
Okay, so what is so I feel like we've come back full circle to we can't agree on something. And so what's the purpose of even having a word like morality?
Right, so, and that's why I start morality calls with please define morality, which I oddly didn't do for you because Matt was starting at the start of the call. You think morality means what does God say? I think morality has to do with well-being, and therefore you're exactly, that's the point. People are trying to be clever about this because they're conflating a word when we're not using it in the same sense and in the same way. And that's the intuitively wrong part. Because I don't think that God has anything to do with whether or not we can evaluate if an action has positive or negative impact based on well-being and flourishing, right? So, did you have more to say? I now feel like maybe we've kept Matt in a cage too long in his self-imposed exile, and so I want to free him from that. Oh, Matt, Matt says no.
I want to see if he can keep his prophecy.
All right. Okay, so on that point, you and I are now agreeing that when we say the word morality, we are not even saying the same thing. Right? Would you agree?
I think that's a fair point. Yeah, I'm sure that our definitions overlap quite a bit. And I would certainly say that my definition includes human flourishing. But I think that where I would disagree is that I think human flourishing is so complicated that we cannot figure that out on our own by simply testing and trying different things. I think we desperately need somebody who understands human nature to step in and tell us. Many of those things are intuitive to us, and we didn't necessarily need God to tell us those things, but many of those things are not. The whole
now
concept of being made in the image of God.
But you understand, you're no longer talking about what grounds it. You're talking now about who is best able to apply the formula.
Okay, yeah, I apologize. Let me jump back away from my rabbit trail then, and just go with the concept of, I think ultimately because of the disagreement on what morality is, and I understand in a best case scenario that you have brought up, in a best case scenario, people will talk civilly. They will come to a consensus on what is the best course to take for human flourishing. But we know that's just not the reality of the situation. People have huge disagreements that cause wars all the time. And so I think the best grounding is to have one omniscient being who created us, who is the grounding for what human morality should look like.
Do you understand you've done the exact same thing a second time, just with different words? That is not, you're using the word grounding when what you mean is the person who's best able to give advice on what the goal that we all agree we want, as opposed to being the goal. God is not the goal. Human flourishing is the goal. You're saying God is the best able to tell us the path to flourishing.
Yeah, so I would say that human flourishing is not the ultimate goal of morality. I would say that human flourishing coincides with the ultimate goal, which is the glory of God.
Okay.
And
so
coincides with the glory of God because we've been made in his image.
Okay. No, do you know what begging the question is?
I've heard that phrase many times, but I'm afraid I could not give you a definition.
That's fine. Fair. So begging the question is when you have put the conclusion of the argument into one of the premises of the argument. So
Okay.
if you are defining morality as giving glory to God, if that is what you say the definition of morality is, then I agree that God is the best way to ground giving glory to God. That is trivially true.
Hello?
Hello, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did I?
Was there a big pause on purpose, or did I just break up?
There was not a big pause on purpose, so perhaps you lost me. So what I said was, I don't know if you heard this or not, because you've defined morality as giving glory to God, or at least that's an aspect of morality in your definition, that is begging the question because you are concluding God obviously has to be the best way of grounding something that is all about glory, giving glory to him, right? But that is not a definition of morality that anyone who doesn't believe in God would even vaguely recognize. So again, we're just talking about, if you want to talk about giving glory to, maybe that's what you should call in and say, the best way to give glory to God is to ground that in God. And then we'd say, cool. All right, off you go. That's circular, that's obvious, trivially true, cool. If you want to call in and say, the best way that human flourishing can only be understood in terms of a God. That's what you have not done yet today. You have not told me why human flourishing. You've said that God is the best way to predict what is a good path to human flourishing. Cool. Maybe not. That just means he's smart. Doesn't mean he's moral. But that doesn't mean that the goal of human flourishing is in any way dependent on there being a God.
Okay. So I'll bring up an example I think I heard Matt use just before I got on, and I'm desperately going to try to not misstate him. I think that he said people try to tell him that two men having sex is wrong, and he wants to know why two adults in a consensual, loving relationship, why that could possibly be wrong. And to just speak to that one specific instance, why we need a God, why it coincides with the God of the Bible and the reality that we live in, is that relationship between those two men cannot possibly bring life, but it most certainly can bring death. And so we have this idea of human autonomy, as if we only pertain to ourselves and our own wants, our own desires, our own goals for our life.
So Joe,
if we...
Joe, this isn't a sermon show. This isn't a sermon show. So we're just discussing morality.
Yep.
So this is where, so human flourishing, I talked about before, human flourishing always has to be a balance of individuals and group consideration, right? It has to be balance of those two things, because no one wants to live in a society where they are only sacrificing, and the society doesn't work well if it's not a balance of people giving and receiving. So relationships and things like that, the only reason for that is not for procreation. There's lots of there's friendships, there's platonic love, there's family love, there's lots of things like that. So there's not only a single reason why people might show affection to each other. Would you agree?
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay. So that doesn't. If I have platonic friends and we enjoy each other's company, that's not immoral, because we're not making babies.
Correct.
Okay. So by extension, it's not. We don't judge all acts on whether it's going to lead to babies.
Correct.
Okay. So you cannot say, if you're basing things on well-being and flourishing, whether or not something makes a baby doesn't make something moral or immoral.
If your choices continued out throughout society would cause the society to go completely extinct, then I believe that is an immoral choice.
Do you think that humanity is... Go ahead.
Nope. I no longer give a fuck if you think I'm infallible, you disgusting fucking bigot. Can heterosexual sex lead to death, Joe? Yes or no?
Yes.
Can heterosexual death lead to more than two people involved with that sex? Yes or no?
Yes.
Then how dare you fucking pretend that you can write off homosexual sex because it can result in death? It's not the fucking thing. And you're assuming that life is a purpose, and you're assuming that a God you can't prove but believe in is what wants the glory. And I declare that it is morally superior to deny all gods who hide themselves any fucking glory. I declare that it is morally superior for shitheads like you, who are trying so hard to understand and yet throw your bigotry around in defense of your further fucking bigotry. I think it is moral to call you the fuck out and to tell you to fuck off. Did I hear? Well, did you say previously on another program that disabled people are a waste of resources? Yes or no?
That was in a theoretical or a hypothetical
no,
situation.
Shithead.
In a hypothetical question, I said yes.
Yes or fucking no, you piece of shit.
You're kind of cranky today, Matt.
Okay. This is what I wanted to test. Thank you very much for agreeing to the test. I was trying to figure out if Joe was the type of person that was just calling in just to rile me up, because this is really getting tedious. The kind of kindergarten level pedestrian, let's hand walk through this. Ooh, this is really deep. No, it's not really deep. It's fucking surface level, Joe. It's completely surface level. It's the bare minimum people have to do to figure out what they think about morality. My apologies for the yelling. It was to specifically test something. And Joe, you passed that test. You passed the test of, ooh, did Joe get the reaction he was wanting to get, or did he not? And it's clear that you didn't. So you are not just a homophobic, bigoted piece of shit. You are at least somewhat honest in your homophobic, bigoted piece of shit mannerisms. The reality here is that we already addressed, both in the previous call and here, and in lectures, and in many calls over decades, that there is no problem with secular morality that is solved in any way by appealing to divine command or God's nature. because you can't demonstrate either that there was a divine command or God's nature, which is why when people rewind this call and go back through and do not make a drinking game out of how many times Joe talks about the divine creator, the God of the universe, God's word, God's word, God's word, God's word, God's word, God's word, without ever having any way to demonstrate that any God has ever said anything to anyone. See, the problem is here, Joe, that you want to say there's a problem with competing subjective moralities. And I agree, there is. But you think you have a non-subjective one, but you don't. You have your opinion of other people's claims about what a God does or doesn't want. Mine appeals directly to, here's what we want. Does this improve data and statistics, facts, empirical observations? Does this improve based on this criteria, or stay the same, or hurt humans? It's as close to objective as you can get because you set a foundation and then you look at facts to determine whether the consequences of an action are consistent with that goal. Your model assumes an objective foundation without ever demonstrating it, and you need people to agree with you that this is the objective foundation, which makes it a subjective agreement, just like mine and Paul's, about whether or not it's okay to sexually assault people. You begin with that. It's not going to work. You can't solve the problem. That's like just your opinion, dude. The reality is, if there's a God, and that God is in fact moral, he should show up right now and explain why your bigoted, ignorant, confused remarks are what is here to represent him. Because while I'm happy to teach your completely uninformed and clueless ass week after week on very simple subjects that you think are deep, while you shrug off, Matt's 10 times smarter than me, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. I don't know, I don't care. But it's weird that someone who thinks you're 10 times smarter than them wants to dismiss what you say and rely on their own view that they cannot demonstrate, do not understand, and when they think surface level discussions are deep. So maybe I am 10 times smarter than you. I don't know. I don't care. What I do know is that when I engage on these subjects, I don't attack homosexuals. When I engage on these subjects, I don't keep appealing to something that we decided it cannot be the standard. I'm able to engage in hypotheticals. I thought Paul did a wonderful job walking you down. Here's another hypothetical. Boom, I hit a brick wall. Here's another hypothetical. Boom, I hit a brick wall. Here's another one. Boom, I hit a brick wall. How many fucking brick walls are you going to beat your head against until you say, man, I'm not ready for this? You backed me into a corner where I had to talk shit about gay people because I can't justify my hatred for them or my disgust by them or my superiority feeling over them or whatever it is. I don't care how you view your homophobia, you are homophobic. When you take that group and hold it up as a prop of fucking immorality for something that is also possible and happens frequently and more frequently among heterosexuals as well, you disgust me, Joe. Go off and think about that. And don't call back until you do. Goodbye. Well, I wanted to have him admit at some point that I'm infallible, despite his previous thing that this would demonstrate infallibility. And I appreciate Paul's patience and everything else. And Paul didn't do anything wrong. But when I see people having a conversation about morality and how to determine what's moral and what's not moral, and I ask a question, hey, why is it that you view this as immoral? And your answer is, because it's not consistent with God's will to reproduce and because it leads to death. You can fuck right off. There are plenty of heterosexual couples that can never reproduce. Is their sex immoral? I'm going to bet that the answer is no, as long as they're married under God's eyes. How about heterosexuals that sleep around and cheat on their spouse? That's immoral too. That's immoral too. Really? How many wives and concubines and mistresses were there in the Bible that were seemingly perfectly okay? Oh, well, I don't know. I'm not necessarily relying on the Bible. I'm not necessarily relying on this. Oh, okay, cool. When I ask you why something's immoral, the purpose is to either see, do we agree, in which case an objective foundation is no longer necessary because we have agreement, which is more powerful anyway, until an objective is demonstrated, or to find out if we disagree, because now your claim of an objective standard is just, to me, hearsay. It's your opinion. You can't point to an objective foundation. You could point to, here are 10 statements. Thou shalt not own other humans as property. Boom, 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 boom. However you want to list them. And you can say, these are the 10 statements that are going to serve as the objective foundation. And I would agree with you. Once you agree that that is the foundation, it stands as the equivalent of an objective foundation. But until there's agreement, it does not stand as the equivalent. But at the end of the day, it's also somebody's subjective assessment on what those rules should be. The thing that you're pointing to is the objective source. And it doesn't matter whether it's Joe or Paul or me and Joe or Paul and Joe and Diane or God. Once we have the criteria, if we're in agreement that that's the correct criteria to live life by, it's as good as and equivalent to and as close as we can ever get to an objective. It doesn't matter. These aren't arbitrary. You should learn the difference between objective and arbitrary, because those come up all the time in these moral discussions. And there's something fundamentally different. Chess is arbitrary. Life is not. What benefits a life and hurts a life is an actual dictation by the physical laws of this universe. If I take this screwdriver and jam it directly into my face and I don't have my glasses there, the laws of physics in the universe dictate what will happen, and the laws of physics about my body will dictate whether or not this is in my best interest or not. There may be some weird circumstance where that's the thing that is most in my best interest. And that's why, in addition to secular morals, I advocate for, and I think we do, but I don't want to throw everybody in there, situational morals, that something can be immoral in almost every circumstance, but this one. It would be wrong to, let's say, break the glass at the pharmacy and steal a defibrillator. But is it still wrong if you're doing it to rescue somebody who's having a heart attack right in front of you? That is the classic example. That's not mine. There are plenty others. And so this is why I say that morality, ethics are situational. I don't know of any situation under which it would be moral to own another human against their will. And it may be that we've found exceptions to situational ethics because they are in such direct conflict with the foundations, which include individual autonomy. This is why I not only am okay with, but I'm supportive of death with dignity. It's why I am in favor of pointing out that veganism may be and probably is morally superior as a virtue, but not necessarily in an obligation or duty, which is another thing that you didn't understand, Joe, because you talked about what would be praiseworthy in our society, which is already a shared subjective opinion. But praiseworthy is about moral virtue. Shameworthy is about moral duty. You were ageist. How do you know that old lady wasn't about to present the cure for cancer? You were homophobic. You evidently elsewhere, when he said disabled people are a waste of resources, this came up probably in a very similar discussion. I know I'm giving like a 40-minute sermon on this, but I'm really pissed. It came up in that discussion because you think that a young, healthy person sacrificing themselves for somebody who's not young and healthy and may not be contributing is not praiseworthy. And so you want to construct a scenario and narrow it down till you can find a version of that where it's not praiseworthy, ignoring the versions where it may be praiseworthy, like that old woman he's laying his life down for is trying to run away from an assailant as she carries the Epstein files directly up to CNN Center. Maybe that's worth a sacrifice, but you want to narrow it down to the scenario that matches what you would like to be a generalization. Yet another fallacy to move from the specific to the general. Ooh, this dog's hairy, so all dogs are hairy. No, they're not. This situation, it would be wrong for a young guy to sacrifice himself for an old one, so that should be the general rule. No, it shouldn't. You have a childish view of morality and a childish view of how to go about investigating it, which is why you thought this was deep when it was beginner. This is first couple of weeks of moral and ethics classes, asking these questions, not the answers. The answers are an incredible process of deep, time-consuming thought on which we do not have agreement. But you professed that the questions were deep, and they're not. They're very simple. My apologies for the sermon, but
well,
if I'm going to,
you'll be happy to
not
know.
be.
We have 2 calls that are exactly about this topic, so we're going to keep talking about this topic for a while. Krishna,
I don't know if I have any more to say on this topic, but let's go.
I know that. Well, Krishna's been waiting for most of the show here, wanting to tell us that morality cannot be reduced to well-being. So, Krishna from the UK, welcome to the Sunday show. You're here with Matt and Paul.
This is going to be disappointing because because I don't know that I'm going to have anything to say in this conversation, because if well-being doesn't count as morality, then somebody needs to show me what morality is and why I should care about it, because I care about well-being and I don't give a fuck if somebody considers it moral or not.
What you got for us, Krishna? Welcome.
Hello, thank you. Firstly, when I say it can't be reduced to well-being, I think well-being is a massive part of it, but it simply can't be broken down to that fundamental level.
Why not?
Well, because, okay, you've entertained the idea that we are actually brains in a vat, right?
Yes.
If it were true that you are just a brain in a vat, would it still be wrong to go out and kill someone?
Yes.
But it doesn't actually harm anyone's well-being. You're the only person that exists. No one else exists.
No. Brain in a vat doesn't mean I'm the only person that exists. If I'm demonstrably the only person in the reality I experience that's left, there is no moral assessment to be made at all anymore, including about whether or not I take my own life.
Okay. I see where you're coming from. I think another thing is this. If you ask someone, let's say you could run a simulation, that's not reality, and you ask someone whether they could commit a graphic act of sexual assault, for example, they would all say that's moral, despite the fact it does not actually harm anyone.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understood you correctly. Are you saying that if you told someone to commit a grossly sexually immoral act in a simulator, everybody would say no?
Yes.
Have you seen people playing GTA 5?
Yes, and we have.
How is that different?
How
is that different? How is that different from being in a simulator?
It isn't. It's still immoral.
Oh, so it's immoral in GTA 5 as well?
Yes.
Okay, I don't agree with that. I don't see.
Yeah, I think we might disagree on that, Krishna.
That would be the case. If I create a video game simulation and I run around slaughtering everybody, it's absurd to claim that I have done something immoral. Like, it's patently absurd.
That's not what I said. If you created a video game and
I asked you I asked you, you should go back and listen, the very question of, is it immoral in GTA 5? And you said yes. Are you changing your position
To
now?
sexually assault someone, yes. If you mean to sexually assault someone in GTA 5, I stand by the fact that that would be immoral.
So one person playing a character in GTA 5 sexually assaulting another character in GTA 5, you are saying that is immoral.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, then you are saying it's immoral, which is what I fucking said when I said I don't agree with you.
Okay, here's another example. I'll take it
I
away
don't
from
need
simulation.
an example. I need you to explain the justification for the one you just failed on.
Okay, I think morality is about 3 different things: outcomes, rules, and intention.
Oh, okay. Why
So,
does intention change whether something is or isn't moral?
well, it's not about whether it changes. It's just that something becomes worse.
I'm sorry. Then if you're going to say you have 3 criteria for morality, and those are outcomes, rules, or 3 considerations: outcomes, rules, and intention, I agree with you that for morality there should be a set of rules, or a view of here's the goal. Then the outcomes are, we compare the outcomes with the goal. You're going to call them rules, I'm going to call them a goal, doesn't matter. And all I'm asking is, if I have a goal and I can assess the outcome, why do intentions matter?
In that instance, your intention is to try and find the best outcome, is what you're saying.
No, I didn't say, wow, I don't know why people don't listen. I did not say what my intention was in that scenario. It's not even a scenario I'm in. I'm saying we have goals. We can assess the outcomes of actions with respect to the goals. Why? What does intention matter to that assessment?
I say intention. I want to clarify it's a hierarchical system, where I say rules are the most important, then it's outcomes, lastly it's intentions. Intention is the least important thing.
I don't give a shit. Why is it that whenever I ask a question like this, you guys decide to restate something or move off somewhere else? I gave you the thing. I don't care what order you put them in. I want to know what value, why is intentions a part of this at all?
In that specific instance, intention has pretty much no worth.
Stop fucking talking. I've already lost my shit once today. Please do not make me do it again. There is no specific instance being discussed. There is general agreement that we have either rules or goals, and we have actions, the consequences of actions, which we can compare to those rules or goals. And I've asked now 2 times, why do you also add in intention? There's no scenario for that. So you don't get to answer by saying in that scenario. I'm asking you to justify your addition of intention. Have you had long enough to type it into ChatGPT so you can get a fucking reply to my question? What's the purpose of adding intention? He ran away.
Oh, he ran away. He's gone. Okay. Well, we that one didn't go as well as we hoped. We have one more morality call in the hopper.
I'm gonna wait. You go, because I had more than enough turn with my soliloquy and merely asking why do you include intention repeatedly.
All right. Well, we're going to move on to the same topic from a different country. We have George from Spain. Welcome to the Sunday Show with Matt and Paul.
Hi guys, very nice to talk to you. Okay, so
George, just a little. George, you're a little loud and a little hot, and it's coming through with a little bit of feedback. So if you can, I don't know if you can adjust your gain or just move a little bit slightly away from the microphone. That'd be awesome.
Okay, that's fine.
Much better. Thank you, George.
Okay, so I wanted to bring you a hypothetical. But before that, I wanted to ask a question, because from listening to the previous calls, I take it that you are kind of utilitarians, right?
Kind of.
I think he's
don't
saying
love
utilitarians.
Utilitarianism. Yeah, I think I don't love labels. From I find like they rarely fit exactly, and not everyone has the same understanding what a label means. But tell me what you think you mean by utilitarianism, and I can decide whether or not I affirm that.
Okay, what I mean is, do you want to maximize well-being in humanity?
I think morality has to do with that.
Okay. The problem here is that when you say you want well-being, or your morality is built on well-being, do you mean well-being as in happiness, or are there other things like not only happiness but also freedom, human development?
Happiness has next to nothing to do with it. I would. Happiness is a small aspect of well-being, and that's why human flourishing and harm are sometimes, the synonyms that get used here.
Okay, here is where I disagree, because I think that we have good, and I don't want to get into the weeds because it could be very complicated, and I am not a neurologist, but I think we have good reason to believe that the only driver of human behavior is either good brain chemicals or bad brain chemicals. Or this is, people do things either to feel good or to avoid feeling bad. So when we come to that, what I mean is, if you are talking about not only I want happiness, I also want justice. Yeah, but you want justice because injustice makes you mad. I want freedom. No, you want freedom because freedom makes you happy. Because freedom gives you the option to pick the option that makes you happy, or because the very notion of freedom makes you feel good feeling. What do you think about that?
I don't think that has to do with necessarily with the feeling. So, for example, I might feel great at the same time. I'm eating food that is terrible for me. Maybe I'm allergic to peanuts, but I really like peanuts, and I'm eating them, and I'm getting that dopamine hit. But I'll die in my sleep, and that'll have nothing to do with whether I receive dopamine. So, I don't agree with your one-to-one mapping. In fact, I think it is different. I think we have evolved to get to some extent. We receive dopamine hits for rewards that actually do. It's the other way around. That it's because that it's things. So certain things are good for us. That's why we get dopamine hits. So, for example, if sex wasn't pleasurable, would there be this many people? There's and that may not be a coherent example for what I just said. So, but I just don't think there's a one-to-one mapping on happiness and dopamine hits in the way that you are saying.
Okay, give me, I don't mean a specific neurochemical. I mean anything that is good or that brings well-being. In the end, it brings well-being because it makes us feel good. So, the easiest way you have to
George, no, George, no.
Okay, I listen.
Let's say that somebody's an addict and they're incredibly happy. If I take steps to free them from that addiction, they're going to be unhappy. And yet, ultimately, it's in their best interest, probably, but possibly. So you're just wrong when you say that we do it because it brings us happiness, but also it doesn't matter why we do it or why you think we do it. What matters is it actually in the interest of our well-being, which is mental well-being and physical well-being. And there's not just a simple, oh, there's a dopamine hit. Oh, this made me happy. Oh, in the long run, I'll be happy. Because there's also short-term well-being and long-term well-being. It's an incredibly difficult situation. Do I work in my personal short-term interest, or perhaps it's better for me to work in your personal short-term interest because that benefits me in the long term? Nobody's saying this is all straightforward and easy at all. But what's the point that you're trying to get to? Because nobody has a solution. Hang on. Nobody has a solution to morality. I'm replying to people who say that an objective foundation must exist. They haven't demonstrated that. They haven't demonstrated how it's possible or how it would be possible for any of us to know. And there's also the problem of hard solipsism, which I think shuts that down as well. But then they'll come in and they'll say, oh, then they'll come in and they'll say, there's a problem with secular morality. What problem exists with secular morality that can be solved by religious morality? That's all I care about. Unless you have a solution to other problems within secular morality, in which case you can demonstrate them and change the world. But I don't think it's going to happen here.
I have a solution, but the solution that I've come to is very, let's say your intuition will tell you that it's horrible, and my intuition tells me that it's horrible. Because if you don't mind, I want to talk to the drug addict thing. Because this person, the reason you are helping them is because you believe, and you are right, that their addiction will bring them a huge amount of suffering in the future, right?
Okay.
So what you are trying to bring is their well-being by eliminating the suffering that their addiction is bringing, that you believe is greater than the pleasure they are feeling from the drugs. And you are right.
Yes. What if I'm wrong?
The thing is that you will be wrong. You can always be wrong.
I'm saying,
but what they mean,
if it's no, I'm saying you're poisoning the well. You just described the situation I'm in. You're saying you want to do something and that will help them, and you are right. What if I'm wrong? Because it's possible for someone to be in a position. Stop talking. It's possible for someone to be in a position, and I think this is the best for them, and so I take that action. From my point of view, I'm doing what I think is best for them, possibly because it's ultimately best for me, but that may not be tied to anything simple like happiness at all. So if we're going to evaluate my action, then my action is the same whether I'm right or I'm wrong, because I believed I was right. So the evaluation of my action is exactly the same whether I'm right or wrong, whether it helps or not. What we evaluate instead are the consequences of the action. And the short-term consequences are that this person is going to suffer more. They're going to suffer withdrawals, etc. But we're betting that the long-term benefits outweigh the short terms. But we might be wrong. And it may never even out. And it means nothing that anybody can quantify. So what is the problem that you're solving, and how do you solve it? Because I'm bored now.
Okay. You don't have to be right. I'm just talking about the tool you are using. I don't think that it is always right. In fact, I think it is many times wrong. But what you are using is, okay, what will bring the best feelings over a certain amount of time? And you're
I literally just talked about short-term and long-term and how they may not go the way you want. They may not go the way you expect. They may never balance out. There's no way to tell. We're operating with that. But now you're talking about what my motivations are, and my motivations are irrelevant to the consequences.
That's true. But
so address the consequences, address the consequences, both the ones where I was right and the ones where I was wrong, and tell me if the consequences say that the act was moral or immoral.
Okay. I think I must have miscommunicated something here, because I am not as concerned with whether the tool works, because I believe the tool was created by evolution and it is imperfect, and it's just as good as it needs to be for us to not have bonus things so far.
I don't know what tool you're talking about.
Okay, Okay, I will be very clear about this. The reason you do what you do is your expectation of the feelings that you will get. Maybe short
I
term,
do
maybe
not
long
give
term.
a
I agree with
shit.
you.
I do not give a shit what you think my motivation is. I said if I take an action to help someone, I think I'm helping someone with an addiction. I may be right or I may be wrong. The consequences of my action can impact that person positively or negatively. My view is that whether if they affect the person positively, that has a different moral valuation because the consequences with respect to the goal of improving their life has been met than it does if the consequences hurt them, because now that would be viewed as immoral. My motivations for taking the action are completely completely irrelevant. I don't need you to tell me why you think I'm doing it, because it doesn't matter, but also you're fucking wrong. I may be trying to help someone, not because it brings me happiness, but because it will earn me clout that will benefit me down the line. I may be the sort of person who cannot experience happiness. There are psychological conditions where people cannot experience happiness, and yet they still take actions. Explain that.
I will be very interested to look into that. I don't know if what we are talking about when we talk about happiness. I don't know if these people really are completely unable to feel any positive feelings. I will be very surprised, but I am happy to look into that. Okay, but let's forget the intention, because I know we won't agree on that. Let's talk about the consequences. When you measure the consequences, when you want to know if this has brought about a benefit or a harm, what are you measuring? How do you know if it has been beneficial?
I'm sorry, my question was, what problem do you see in the secular moral system I'm advocating for, and what is your solution? That was my question.
Okay, if we want people to feel as good as possible, as many people as possible,
I don't.
for as long as possible.
George, I don't want as many people as possible to feel as good as possible. So there we go. What problem is there with secular morality, and what's your solution? Last chance.
Okay, because if that is not your morality, that means that there is something else that you value.
George, I don't need you to tell me what I value or anything else. I need you to answer the question that you've been fucking asked repeatedly. You seem to have been operating on assumptions about what our position is because you either don't understand it, maybe we haven't explained it well, or whatever else. You should need no assumptions or no knowledge or understanding of my position or Paul's position. For the last fucking time, I'm going to unmute you and ask you the question so that the beep doesn't interfere. What problem with secular morality do you think you have a solution for? Go.
Okay, let's say I am the government of a country, right? And what I want is to do the best thing for my people. But that leads me to the conclusion that my scientists in a basement somewhere have invented this machine that you put it into your brain and it makes you happy. As happy as you can biologically.
George.
Forever.
George. I said for the last time,
yes, thank you.
Shut up. I am tempted to be a man of my word and hang up right now. But I genuinely want to know. So I need you to say, here's the problem I think I can solve, and then state the problem only. Go.
Okay. The problem with an utilitarian morality that is built on well-being, which maybe is not yours, and I think, and I don't want to presume anything about your ideas, because I know you don't like that, and I understand that you don't like it.
Goodbye. You've wasted enough of my fucking time. Goodbye. What a way to end the show. Oh, here's the problem with utilitarian morality, which may or may not be yours. How do you blah, blah, blah? I give up. If there is an answer, if I have an answer to whatever question he was working towards, I already fucking gave it. Because secular morality, the moral system that I'm advocating for, is not simple utilitarian. It is utilitarian in nature. And it's where we compare the consequences of actions to a set of goals. Are those set of goals arbitrary? No, they're not arbitrary. I mean, we decided on what they are, but we did it for reasons. And we didn't just say, oh, let's try this for fun. But you could do that. You could pick 3 or 4 arbitrary values. Let's say we start with death is generally preferable to life. Sickness is generally preferable to health. And lying is really good. If our goal is to actually have a world that we occupy with our lives potentially improving, or at a minimum, as in chess, not getting worse, all of those directly contradict that foundation. And that foundation, which is not completely defined and scoped out because we don't have a complete understanding of the world, is what I'm calling well-being. If you begin with, life is generally preferable to death, but there are exceptions, which is why I support death with dignity. And health is generally preferable to sicknesses. There are some health conditions that make you immune to some other conditions that may actually be beneficial, even though they're unhealthy in some circumstances, because we live in a dynamic universe and it's changing. I mean, that's what dynamic means. So it was dumb of me to say twice, but I'm on a roll. We are changing, and so is the universe at the same time. This is one of the reasons why evolution is such an amazing view of the diversity of life on Earth, because there's no guidance. There's no eye that says, you live and you die. It is the physical facts of the universe determining if this package of whatever, this creature and this environment are remotely compatible. And the ones that are compatible continue. And the ones that aren't compatible don't. That's it. It's the simplest filter. And we can use that abstract idea elsewhere as well. There are great moral principles. Some of them that weren't even necessarily presented initially as moral principles. John Rawls' Veil of Ignorance, one of my all-time favorite things to reference. Design the system that you're going to participate in, not knowing who you will be. This is, it's kind of, if you're going to divide a cake up, one person cuts the cake into pieces and they pick last. It's like ideas like that we're trying to support fairness. But if you design the world that you're happy to live in, not knowing who you're going to be, does that mean that you're going to be okay with slavery? Because remember, you could come as a slave. Does that mean that people born with an extra digit just get killed right away? Because you might be born that way. It's a great thing. And when we compare it, when we use it in conjunction with broad ideas like natural selection is not simply survival of the fittest. It is the elimination of those who aren't fit within this band. Survival of the fittest gets this perception like, oh, I'm the biggest and baddest on the block and I'm going to go kill everybody else. And yes, that definitely happens in lots of different areas. But what could also be fit is someone who couldn't harm a fly, but knows how to hide and protect well, knows how to create tools, knows how to create things that keep the ones that can eat them from eating them. Maybe that's it. Maybe the fittest is the smartest. Probably not. Maybe the fittest is the strongest physically. Probably not. Maybe the fittest changes. And maybe there's other criteria like emotional intelligence, the capacity for hope, the capacity for love. We don't know enough to actually understand the full scope of well-being. But you know what we do know enough to understand? Thou shalt not kill is an English translation of something that was passed down and originally written in other languages. And it's debatable whether it means thou shalt not end someone's life or thou shalt not unjustly end someone's life, which is what murder is. It does make a little bit of a difference. I think the best understanding if we're being as charitable as possible, is that clearly it's talking about unjust killing because it orders them to kill other people in the same context. We can say, that's not good. We have more laws related to when one person kills another. And they're not just first degree, second degree, third degree murder, negligent homicide, wrongful. You know, there's so many different categories for accidental deaths and how negligent you are. We, in the modern era, recognize that thou shalt not kill wasn't enough. And it definitely isn't enough when you're saying thou shalt not kill, but go and slaughter all the Ammonites and all the Amalekites. But, you know, keep the young virgin girls for yourself. We know more than the people who came before us. And what's incredibly frustrating is that once I realized that, once I found out that I know more than a first century goat herder in Palestine, I was freed from having to accept the ridiculous things that goat herder in Palestine would actually be reasonable in accepting because of the information he's got at the time. That's freeing. And it allows us to stop looking at, ooh, here's dictated morality. And I know the last caller was not advocating for the Bible or anything else. This is the show summary that I'm going to do because I took somebody's advice and toked up while I was sitting there doing nothing. The advantage that we have is in recognizing that we don't have an objective, absolute, external thing to point to and say, this is morality. But what we have is a goal. The goal of getting better at getting better. So secular moral systems have one grand advantage that religious pronouncements don't, which is you can change them. When you get new evidence and you get a better understanding of what well-being is. We've changed our understanding of well-being. We have a better understanding of psychological issues than we ever have in the past. And it changes whether Jim Bob down the street is, an uneducated hayseed or a mass murderer in overalls. And we know more about this stuff, but we don't know it all. But as long as we have the goal of getting better, it allows us to go back and change things. And you can change things right down to the foundations. If it turns out, and I think this is preposterous, if it turns out that death is preferable to life, then we should change it from life is preferable to death as a kind of an axiom. Death is preferable to life. I don't think that's going to work out very well. But what do I know? For the people who think that death is the thing that frees them to go on to an eternal existence, for them, maybe death is better than life. I hope there's something good somewhere for someone. It would be nice, perhaps, if everyone could experience the maximum good possible at any given time. But those are not the simplistic goals of my moral system. Just like I wish everybody could be rational. I wish everybody could spot fake news. I wish people could spot edited clips, AI. It's getting harder and harder to be able to tell the difference. Oh, here's a naked Trump. We deep faked a face on him. Okay. We know they're doing it because it's South Park, and they said they are. It's getting to the point where it's harder and harder to tell the truth from the lie. It's incredibly frustrating. And if we sit here and we keep saying, okay, you think you have a better way. What's wrong with this and how do you fix it? What's wrong with the secular system we're talking about and how do you fix it? I don't need you to label it. I don't need you to give me a history of it. I don't need you to give me a quiz. Just what's wrong? How do you fix it? Do you think your God fixes it? How? And how do we know it's actually a God and whether or not that God's right? Even if God showed up here right now, said, excuse me, Matt, Paul, split it apart, took over, said, hi, I'm God. I'd like to talk to you guys today about morality. And I say that if you are not tattooed on at least one entire arm, you are grossly immoral and damned to hell. And then vanished. Well, hang on, that contradicts with what the Bible says about markings on the body and all that. I don't know. I'm off. I'm off track because we got so close on so many calls today. Where it was like, and then it's, oh, let me throw out some homophobic stuff. Oh, let me just refuse to answer the question over and over again. So I feel like Paul tried desperately to rescue me from myself today. And I'm okay with not being rescued, because I think there's times when an outburst is the morally correct thing to do. If it just becomes well, we can all sit around, we can agree, disagree, whatever, No, sometimes you need to be shocked into paying attention. Sometimes you need to be aware that what you are saying glibly, using a particular group of people as a prop, has consequences on those people. And that you, while pretending you have an objective source of morality and everybody else must be wrong, are actually giving your subjective fucking opinion about morality. Maybe you should shove it up your ass. Who knows? You might like it. Maybe that's the source of your homophobia. Is that somehow you've been sitting there thinking, I'd really like to. You guys think about other people's sex lives more than anybody I know. And I know sex workers. I have family and friends who are sex workers. They don't think about sex as much as, it's like the little cartoons of we're going to have people show us their genitals before they get to go into the bathroom and everything. It's just, what is this world, Paul? Do we have any hope of fixing it? Because I keep asking for solutions and I keep getting nothing, and it feels worse.
I will agree that it does seem to feel worse, but that's why we fight in the corners where we can.
Well, make us happy. Give us something optimistic.
Well, what we're optimistic about is that Seth and Forrest are going to have a much better set of callers than we had tonight, and so you should stay tuned for that.
I hope they get the same callers and do better with them.
Oh, or maybe that'll happen as well. But there's always the next caller. There's always the next mind to be changed, and the next mind to be changed might be ours. You never know.
Tune in 2 hours for the Sunday show after dark. That's it for us today. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks to the callers, including the ones that were incredibly frustrating. Don't forget, you can go to linemerch.com to find stuff here on the line. You can go to patreon.com/call the line to join and participate, as well as liking and subscribing and becoming a member here. There are all different ways to support the Line Network. Stay tuned, because there's a lot more coming, including special shows and events.
And thanks to Stephanie Helms for call screening.
And thank you so much to Stephanie Helms. Absolutely. We had Stephanie step in as a call screener at the last minute, so we appreciate you as always.